Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, How to Make Your Quirk HTMYQ, by Mr_00. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. Once upon a time in a bustling city, a group of young heroes in training navigated the challenges of their unique abilities, known as quirks. Among them was a determined student named Izuku Midoriya, who dreamed of becoming the greatest hero despite being born without a quirk. As he trained diligently, he formed strong bonds with his classmates, including the confident Katsuki Bakugo and the kind-hearted Ochiko Uraraka. Together, they faced various trials that tested their skills and teamwork. One day, their instructor announced a special training exercise that would push them to their limits. The students were excited yet anxious, knowing that this would be a pivotal moment in their journey. Izuku, fueled by his longing to prove himself, encouraged his friends to give their best. "We can do this together," he said, his voice filled with determination. As the training commenced, the students encountered unexpected challenges that required them to rely on one another. Through moments of struggle and triumph, they learned the true meaning of friendship and heroism. With each passing day, they grew stronger, not just in their abilities but also in their understanding of what it meant to be a hero. The bonds they formed would carry them through the toughest of times, shaping their futures as they aimed for greatness. And so, their adventure continued, filled with hope, challenges, and the promise of becoming the heroes they aspired to be. Chapter 1. Midoriya Izuku, known for his courage and determination, took his last breath in a world that had come to depend on the heroes he had always wanted to be. Throughout his long life, Izuku witnessed the rise and fall of many, yet he remained committed to protecting the innocent, even without the power of one for all. His legacy as a symbol of peace inspired generations, but as he closed his eyes for the final time, a sense of incompleteness lingered. However, fate had other plans for Izuku. In a twist that defied reality, he found himself in a void, facing a screen that read, "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya, you have demonstrated over 110 years of selflessness. As a result of your good karma, you have accumulated uncountable karma points. You get to relive your life as we see fit. Not only that, with your complete lack of sin, you can wield any quirk you choose." Izuku stared in disbelief, his mind racing with the weight of this revelation. He had died, lived a life of heroism, and was now given the incredible chance to choose his own quirk. His heart swelled with excitement, reminiscent of the joy he felt when All Might had inspired him years ago. After a moment of contemplation, he whispered to the void, "Show me all quirks, please." A vast tier system unfolded before his eyes, categorizing quirks by their power, rarity, and potential usage in a dazzling array of colors and symbols. At the top were the most powerful quirks, like one for all and all for one. However, he hesitated at the thought of choosing one for all, knowing it would be too recognizable, especially if All Might passed it on to someone else. All for one, on the other hand, was a quirk Izuku could never consider. Even after decades since the final battle, he felt it was a quirk associated with villainy, as it took not only other quirks but also a part of the user's personality. He quickly dismissed that option. As he scanned the tiers, his eyes fell upon a peculiar section titled F tier, sparking his curiosity. He had never considered such a classification before. Upon closer inspection, he found quirks that seemed insignificant or forgotten. One quirk caught his attention, Quirk Bestowal. This was the original quirk of the first one for all user, a man who had prevented all for one from dominating. It allowed the user to bestow their quirk upon another individual. The moment Izuku saw it, a spark of curiosity ignited within him. The idea of quirk bestowal intrigued him, as he considered the implications of such a power. He could give others the gift of a quirk, allowing them to experience the joy and responsibility that came with it, just as All Might had done for him. This power could usher in a new era of heroes, where everyone had the chance to be extraordinary. But as he reached out to select the quirk, a sudden realization struck him. If he chose this power, he would be giving up his own chance at heroism. His heart raced as he grappled with the decision. Was he ready to relinquish the dream he had chased for so long? He set quirk bestowal aside, contemplating the implications of his choice. The potential of the quirk grew clearer with each passing moment. If he could merge quirk bestowal with other quirks, the possibilities were endless. He could create a new quirk, unseen before in human history. As Izuku pondered over his decision, he noticed the C-tier section, where quirks with unique and subtle effects were placed. He considered merging quirk bestowal with quirks from this tier to create something incredibly useful. He scanned through the options, looking for a quirk that could complement his newfound ability. One quirk stood out, Echo, which allowed its user to mimic sounds they heard for a short PRD. It wasn't particularly strong, but it had its uses in reconnaissance. Another was Chameleon, which granted its user the ability to blend into their surroundings, invaluable for stealth missions. Izuku's thoughts grew more complex as he examined the tiers. He understood that a hero's strength wasn't solely determined by their quirk, it was a combination of their heart, mind, and choices. If he merged quirk bestowal with a less recognizable quirk, he could create something that would serve the greater good without drawing unnecessary attention. Moving to the B-tier section, he found quirks like air pressure control, which allowed the user to manipulate air, creating powerful gusts. There was also molecular acceleration, which could increase the speed of an object's molecules, useful for both combat and rescue missions. These quirks had potential, but they were still too well known. Finally, he stumbled upon the D tier, the lowest tier where quirks were often dismissed as inconsequential. Yet, Izuku saw value in these overlooked abilities. He focused again on Echo and Chameleon. If he merged these with quirk bestowal, he could create a quirk that allowed him to blend into his environment and copy the abilities of those around him. It would be a versatile tool for a new kind of hero. The idea blossomed in his mind. He could become the unsung hero, empowering others while remaining in the shadows, a silent guardian. His heart raced with excitement at the prospect of this new path. He could train others, watch them grow, and help them achieve their dreams. The potential was endless. Taking a deep breath, Izuku made his decision. He pointed to quirk bestowal, and then to Echo and Chameleon. The screen acknowledged his choice with a soft beep and began the merging process. As the quirks fused together, a new, unprecedented quirk was born, Echo Chameleon. He felt a surge of energy, and his body tingled with the newfound power coursing through his veins. Izuku knew that his life was about to take a dramatic turn. With Echo Chameleon, he could become a MSTR of disguise and support, a hero who didn't need the spotlight to make a difference. The merging process was quick, but he wasn't done yet. His eyes darted back to the screen, searching for more quirks to enhance his newfound abilities. The E tier was next on his list, a realm of quirks so common and single-use that they often went unnoticed. Among them was Sticky Fingers, which granted the user sticky skin, and elasticity, allowing for the stretching and manipulation of one's body. Izuku knew that while these quirks might seem trivial, in the right context, they could be surprisingly effective. He wondered how they might interact with Echo Chameleon. Would he be able to stick to surfaces while being invisible, or perhaps copy the stretchiness of someone nearby? As the E-tier option swam before him, Izuku's gaze landed on Thermal Sense, a quirk that allowed its user to detect heat signatures. It wasn't a combat-oriented ability, but it could be crucial for search and rescue operations. He quickly made his selections, and the quirks began to merge with his existing one. The process was seamless, each addition subtly altering the way Echo Chameleon felt. Now, not only could he mimic sounds and appearances, but he could also sense the heat of his surroundings. He tested the new power, focusing on the warmth of his own body and the coolness of the void around him. The combination of quirks was more potent than he had anticipated. Emboldened by his success, Izuku moved up to the D tier. Here, quirks like microscopic and minor healing resided. He considered the former, which would allow him to see the world at a cellular level, and the latter, which could be a boon for those who needed immediate medical attention. Both had their uses, but he knew that the most powerful quirks wouldn't be found in the spotlight. With a knowing smile, Izuku scanned the C-tier once more, his eyes resting on Echo and Chameleon. He had a feeling that these quirks would be the foundation of something truly extraordinary. With Quirk Bestowal at its core, Echo Chameleon was already a formidable ability. But he wasn't satisfied yet. He wanted to push the boundaries of what was possible, to create a quirk that could revolutionize the very concept of heroism. The C-tier was ripe with potential. Quirks like Echo and Chameleon had been underestimated for too long, but in Izuku's mind, they were the perfect candidates for fusion. He pictured the synergy, giving someone the ability to not only blend into their surroundings but also mimic the sounds of their environment. It was a stealthy combo that could turn the tide in any battle or save a life in the most unexpected ways. As the quirks melded together, Izuku felt his body adapt. The tingling grew more intense, and he could almost hear the whispers of his new abilities taking shape. The screen before him flashed with the final result, Camouflage Echo, a quirk that allowed the user to mimic sounds and sights, and blend into the environment seamlessly. It was the perfect blend of stealth and utility, a tool that could serve him well in his new role as a hero of the shadows. But Izuku's hunger for growth wasn't satiated. He scanned the tiers once more, seeking the perfect, B-tier, quirk to complete his arsenal. His gaze fell upon Soundwave, a quirk that allowed the user to manipulate sound waves, creating sonic blasts or shields. It was a powerful ability that could complement his existing quirks in surprising ways. Merging Soundwave with Camouflage Echo was a risk, but one that Izuku was willing to take. He felt the power of the B-tier quirk resonate within him, and as the fusion was complete, a new dimension of his ability unlocked. He could now manipulate the sounds he echoed, turning them into powerful tools of distraction or defense. His heart raced with excitement as he tested the limits of his newfound might. The resulting quirk was a symphony of abilities, each one harmonizing with the next. He could blend into the shadows, mimic the whispers of the night, and even bend sound to his will. It was a quirk that would allow him to be a hero in his own way, empowering others without the weight of the world on his shoulders. But something tugged at his heart. Despite his excitement, Izuku couldn't shake the feeling that he was ignoring the true potential of the A-tier quirks. He knew that with great power came great responsibility, and perhaps the most responsible choice would be to wield a quirk that could directly affect the course of battles. His gaze drifted back to the A-tier section, and he found himself drawn to Body Bulk, a quirk that allowed the user to bulk up their entire body, greatly increasing their physical strength and size. Izuku pondered the implications of combining Body Bulk with Camouflage Echo. It would be a stark contrast to his former life's quirk, yet it held a certain appeal. The ability to blend in and be unnoticed, only to reveal formidable strength when needed, was a strategy that resonated with his tactical mind. He knew that the choice was risky. A-tier-like quirks often came with unwanted attention and expectations of grandeur. But he was not the same person he was when he first received one for all. He had grown, learned, and was ready to embrace a new kind of heroism. He looked at more quirks at the other tiers and was quite surprised to find that there were many unique and powerful abilities scattered throughout the lower tiers as well. Some of the quirks he found particularly interesting included C-tier invisibility, which allowed the user to turn their body invisible at will, providing a strategic advantage in stealth missions, B-tier overclock, which allowed the user to accelerate to extreme speeds, and A-tier super regeneration, which allowed the user to regenerate parts of the body at a fast rate. With how many bones had been broken last time, this would be useful. The D-tier quirk, Pain Blocker, allowed the user to be unable to detect any pain, both inside and outside their body, though they would still be injured. If he needed the super regeneration, he'd rather not feel it. Izuku had chosen several quirks, and these were just the first. With a satisfied nod, he clicked the screen to confirm the merger of Body Bulk with Camouflage Echo. He watched as the two quirks swirled together in a display of lights and symbols. His body grew warm, and he could feel his muscles tense and relax as the quirks integrated. The fusion was complete, and a new title appeared on the screen, Soundless Titan. The name suited him perfectly, a silent giant who could sneak up on anyone. With Soundless Titan, Izuku could manipulate his body's mass, increasing his strength and size while still maintaining his ability to blend into the environment and mimic sounds. It was a powerful combination that would allow him to support from afar or charge into battle when needed. But Izuku wasn't finished yet. He looked back at the quirks he had merged so far. Soundless Titan was a formidable tool, but he wanted to be prepared for any situation. He returned his gaze to the D-tier section and hovered over Pointer. It was a quirk that didn't seem to fit his current theme, but the potential for reconnaissance and navigation was too tempting to ignore. He decided to take the risk and merge it with Soundless Titan. The screen flashed once more, and the quirks combined to create Echoing Bulk Navigator. The fusion was unlike anything he had felt before. His senses heightened, allowing him to not only sense his surroundings but to navigate them with uncanny precision. He could feel the pull of his targets, guiding him to them as if they were connected by an invisible thread. The quirks were now so intertwined that their names reflected the symbiosis of their abilities. Excited by the prospect of his evolving power, Izuku scanned the tiers once again, looking for the perfect final piece to complete his quirk set. His eyes fell upon C-tier's invisibility. The strategic potential of being able to move unseen was immense. He could protect and empower from the shadows without ever being discovered. The thought was exhilarating. Merging invisibility with Echoing Bulk Navigator was like adding the final slide to a masterpiece. The screen flickered, and the new quirk coalesced into Camouflaged Titan Navigator. It was a name that spoke of stealth and power, a quirk that could change the landscape of heroism. Izuku felt his heart race with anticipation. He had crafted a quirk that was unlike any other, a quirk that could make him the ultimate support for any hero. With the ability to bulk up, turn invisible, copy sounds, and navigate with unparalleled precision, he would be the unsung hero that the world never saw coming. But he wasn't done yet. His gaze drifted back to the B-tier section, where Overclock caught his eye. This quirk allowed its user to speed up their perception of time, making them incredibly fast and reactive. The thought of combining this power with his Camouflaged Titan Navigator was exhilarating. He knew that the combination could create a quirk that would allow him to be a force to be reckoned with, even in the most chaotic of battles. With a decisive click, Overclock began to merge with Camouflaged Titan Navigator. The process was quick, the two quirks seemingly eager to become one. Izuku felt his body pulse with a newfound energy, and his senses grew even sharper. The quirks harmonized, creating a symphony of power that resonated within him. The screen flickered once more, and the product emerged, merged quirk, Phantom Guardian. The name reflected the quirk's essence, a hero who could control the flow of battle, unseen yet ever present. With his enhanced speed, he could move swiftly through the shadows, guiding and protecting without ever being seen by villains. But as the euphoria of his newfound abilities settled, a flicker of doubt crept into Izuku's mind. He had merged Soundless Titan with invisibility, Overclock, and Pointer, creating a quirk that was both stealthy and powerful. Yet, the memory of his past battles, the challenges he had faced, whispered to him of the need for something more. Izuku was ready for the final fusion. He moved the title card saying Super Regeneration to Phantom Guardian. This was it. A quirk that could heal him from almost any injury, granting him the ability to push beyond his physical limits and keep fighting for those who needed him most. The screen came to life one last time, and the product of the two quirks emerged, Spectre Sentinel, a name that whispered of a protector that could not be stopped, even by the harshest of wounds. The fusion was complete. Izuku felt his body surge with power, a mix of excitement and trepidation washing over him. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. With a deep breath, he clicked the screen to start his second chance at life. The world around him swirled into a kaleidoscope of colors, and he felt himself being drawn into the abyss. Here's hoping he could do better this time. As the colors faded, Izuku found himself in a familiar setting, though it was not the world he had left behind. He was in a hospital, and the soft cries of a newborn filled the air. His vision slowly cleared to reveal a room bustling with activity, and he realized that he was staring at his own tiny hands. He looked up to see the amazed faces of the doctors and nurses surrounding him, their eyes drawn to his unmistakable full head of white hair and fully red eyes, including the scara, a stark contrast to either of his parents. The room grew quieter as Inko, his mother, cradled him in her arms, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the doctors, their voices trembling as they whispered, "Is his quirk related to anyone in your family?" She searched her mind for any hint of quirks in their lineage but came up short. "No," she replied softly, "not that I'm aware of. My family has telekinetic quirks, and his father's side has fire quirks as far as I'm aware." Izuku simply stared at her. It had been so long since he'd heard her voice that he had forgotten it was possible to feel warmth and love in such a simple gaze. He tried to speak, to tell her it was him, her son, but his mouth would not form words, only cries of a newborn. Inko looked down at him, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. She had felt something strange during her PRGNNCY, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. One of the doctors stepped forward, a gentle smile on his face as he spoke softly to Inko. He informed her that her son's quirk appeared to be very rare. It wasn't unusual for a child to manifest a quirk that didn't match their family lineage, and they would need to run tests to understand the full extent of his abilities. Inko nodded, her grip on Izuku tightening slightly. She felt scared for her child and the attention he would draw, but she understood that fear was part of being a mother, especially in a world filled with heroes and villains. She had hoped her son would inherit a quirk that would allow him to lead a quiet life, but fate had other plans. As the doctor began to examine Izuku, the young hero's thoughts raced. He knew he had to be careful and keep his true identity hidden. He needed to learn to control these new abilities and become the hero he was always meant to be, without the burdens of his past. The thought of putting his mother through pain again was unbearable. However, the whispers of his former life grew louder, echoing battles fought and friends lost. Deep down, he was still Izuku Midoriya, the boy who dreamed of becoming a hero. As he felt the power of Spectre Sentinel coursing through him, he made a silent vow to use his second chance to protect those who could not protect themselves, ensuring that no one else suffered as he had. The doctor brought him back to reality, explaining that Izuku's quirk was indeed unique, with a combination of abilities they had never encountered before. They would need to monitor him closely to ensure his healthy development and understand how his quirk would manifest as he grew. Inko's eyes never left her baby boy's face as she expressed her determination to do whatever it took for him. Izuku felt a surge of pride for his mother, who had always been his rock. He knew she would support him through anything, just as she had in his past life. Days passed in a blur of tests and doctor's visits, but through it all, Inko was there, her love and strength a constant presence. Izuku slowly grew, his quirk remaining dormant, much to his relief. He studied his mother's face, committing every detail to memory, knowing he had to be strong for her. You may wonder where Izuku's father was. He had discovered in his past life that his father had passed away before he was born, leaving Inko to raise him alone amidst her own struggles. Yet, she had done an amazing job. In the quiet moments between the whirlwind of hospital activity, Izuku thought about the conversation they had in their small apartment when she revealed the truth about his father. Her eyes had been filled with sadness and determination as she explained that his father had been killed during a villain's rampage before Izuku's BRTH. The revelation had shaken him, filling him with a sense of loss for the hero he had never known. The weight of that memory was heavy as he watched his mother now, her eyes filled with fierce love that had carried them through so much pain. He knew he had to protect her from the dangers of the quirked world, from the very fate that had taken his father from them. One of the nurses suggested they would have to wait and see if any other parts of his quirk manifested, perhaps his quirk was simply having fully red eyes. Inko nodded, her eyes focused on her son. Inko felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had lived this moment before. Yet, she knew that was impossible, she had never seen a baby with eyes like Izuku's. There was something comforting in the familiarity, filling her with hope. She wondered what this could mean for her baby's future. Would he be a hero like many others aspired to be, or would he be feared and misunderstood? Through the haze of exhaustion and fear, Inko made a silent promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to ensure that Izuku grew up to be a force for good, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt dark. She would be his shield, his guide, and his biggest fan. No matter what path he chose, she would be there, supporting him every step of the way. Finally, after 2 weeks of observation and testing, the doctors deemed it safe for Izuku and Inko to leave the hospital. The moment they stepped into their quiet apartment, the weight of the outside world seemed to lift from their shoulders. The familiar sights and smells brought comfort, a stark contrast to the sterile walls of the hospital. Inko carefully placed Izuku in his crib, his tiny hands grasping at the air. The first night at home was restless for Inko. Every little sound made her jump, her eyes darting to the monitor by her bedside to ensure Izuku was okay. She had read all the reports and knew his quirk was still a mystery, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to him than met the eye. The next day, as the sun streamed in through the windows, Izuku began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, Inko thought she saw a spark of recognition in them, but it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by the innocent gaze of a newborn. They spent their days in a gentle routine of feeding, changing, and soothing. Yet, Izuku's mind was far from at peace. He observed the world around him with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life, trying to piece together a new existence from the fragments of his past. While Izuku's body was that of a newborn, his soul remained that of a seasoned hero. He marveled at the simplicity of a world that had yet to be shaped by his influence. The mundane tasks of changing diapers and swaddling brought him comfort, a stark contrast to the battles he had once faced. As he watched Inko's tender care, Izuku felt a pang of longing for his youth, reminiscing about the days when he admired All Might, dreaming of the power he could one day hold. The Spectre Sentinel, Quirk remained dormant, which relieved him. He knew that once it awakened, his life would change forever. He had to prepare, to learn, and to grow not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. This second chance was a gift, but it also came with a heavy burden. The world was vastly different from the one he had left behind, and he had to navigate it with the vulnerability of a child. In those quiet moments, as Inko sang him lullabies that echoed in his memory, he contemplated his future. Would he find the same friends? The same mentors? The same battles? Or would this new path lead him to uncharted territory? He felt the urge to reach out and tell her everything, to ease the burdens she had carried alone. But he knew he couldn't, the truth was too great for anyone to bear, especially a mother with a heart as pure as hers. Izuku made a silent promise to himself each night as he drifted off to sleep. He would grow, he would learn, and he would become the hero he was destined to be. But this time, he would do it for her, for Inko, the woman who had given him life not once, but twice, and for his father, a man of honor. One evening, as Inko prepared dinner, a strange notification appeared in the corner of Izuku's vision. It was a quest notification, something he hadn't seen since his days in the void. His heart raced as he read the words, "Welcome back, user, you have received your first quest. Quest, remind Inko Midoriya about your father. Reward, Quirk, fire breathing. Failure, N.A. Izuku's mind raced as he tried to understand the significance of the quest. His father's legacy had always inspired him, but he never expected it to play a part in his new life. He closed his eyes and searched his memories, trying to recall every word Inko had said about her husband. In his past life, she had revealed that his father was an avid trombone player, always playing a certain tune. Days turned into weeks, and the quest remained in the back of Izuku's mind. He watched Inko closely for the right moment to fulfill his task. The opportunity presented itself one quiet afternoon as Inko sat beside the crib, her eyes lost in thought. Izuku sensed her sadness, the longing for the man she had loved, and the fear for her child in this unpredictable world. He took a deep breath and focused his newborn lungs, trying to remember the melody of his father's playing. The soft, mournful notes of Moon River floated through his thoughts, and he hummed it softly. Inko's eyes snapped to him, and she leaned closer, her hand shaking slightly. Izuku, she whispered, did you? Izuku nodded, his eyes filling with tears. He knew he had to be careful, if he revealed too much too soon, it could break her. He reached out with his tiny hand and touched her cheek, a silent promise that he was there and that he understood. The warmth of her skin was a stark reminder of the human connection he had missed for so long. Inko's eyes searched his, and for a moment, he thought she could see him, the hero she had raised, the man she had lost. But the moment passed, and she took his hand, her thumb gently stroking his palm. Your father used to play this for me, she said, her voice filled with bittersweet nostalgia. He said it was the most appealing tune he knew. The words unlocked a treasure trove of memories. The melody grew stronger, and Izuku felt the warmth of the reward, fire breathing, merged with Spectre Sentinel, the quirk fusion resulted in Anabi Sentinel. The realization hit him, and he couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of his newfound power. A quirk that allowed him to blend into shadows and absorb fire. The implications were vast, and the potential for creativity in combat was exhilarating. His eyes lit up with fiery determination, a symbol of the new power he had earned. The quest had served its purpose, not just to remind Inko of her lost love, but to strengthen the bond between them. The room grew warmer as a soft, golden glow enveloped Izuku. He felt the heat within him, a gentle warmth that grew stronger with each breath. He knew he had to keep it hidden for now, to protect himself and those around him. But the promise of the future was a beacon, guiding him through the fog of his new existence. As Inko continued to talk about his father, Izuku made another silent vow. He would honor his mother's love and sacrifice, and he would carry forth the legacy of the man who had never had the chance to meet his son. The quirk was a part of him now, a piece of his soul that had been passed down through the ages. The days grew longer, and Izuku grew stronger, his body adapting to the new quirks that lay dormant within him. He watched the world around him with keen eyes, absorbing every detail. He noticed the subtle shifts in people's behaviors, the whispers of fear and hope that filled the air. He knew that the time was approaching when he would have to make his presence known, when he would have to step into the shoes of a hero once again. Inko, too, noticed the changes in her baby. His eyes, though still red, had a knowing quality that seemed to gaze into the depths of her soul. His cries were less frequent, and when they did come, they seemed to hold a melody, almost as if he were trying to communicate. Her heart swelled with love and a hint of concern. What kind of quirk could her son have? Would he be like the heroes she had always admired from afar? The weeks passed, and with each new skill Izuku acquired, Inko grew more curious. He was developing at an astonishing rate, sitting up, rolling over, and even speaking a few words by the time he was 6 months old. His vocabulary was limited, but the words he did say held a wisdom beyond his years. Inko often found herself lost in thought, wondering if perhaps there was more to her baby than met the eye. One evening, as she rocked him to sleep, she whispered, Izuku, my sweet boy, what is it that you're trying to tell me with those eyes? What secrets do you hold within? His response was a soft coo, a gentle reminder that he was still just a baby. But as she watched him, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about him. Inko's curiosity grew with every passing day, as Izuku's development continued to surpass that of any normal child. He could sit up and play with toys with a precision that was unnerving, almost as if he had done so countless times before. She noticed that his eyes often searched the room, as if looking for something specific. Inko found herself lost in thought as she watched her baby, who was already standing with the help of the crib bars at 8 months. The way he moved was eerily reminiscent of the heroes she had seen in action, yet she pushed the thought away, attributing it to her overactive imagination fueled by her love for Izuku. 3 months later, Inko had grown increasingly concerned about Izuku's strange development, so she decided to take him for strolls through a nearby park more often. It was during one of these outings that she bumped into Mitsuki, who was pushing her own baby, Katsuki, in a stroller. Both mothers exchanged pleasantries, their eyes lighting up at the sight of each other's children. Inko felt a peculiar mix of excitement and dread as she watched the two babies interact. Izuku's gaze remained sharp and focused, his movements deliberate as if he was sizing up the world around him. Katsuki, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of energy, his temper already showing signs of manifestation in the occasional giggles that echoed through the park. Mitsuki suggested a playdate, her eyes sparkling with the hope of forging a bond between her spirited child and Inko's prodigy. Inko nodded, her heart racing at the thought of Izuku being around someone his own age. 3 days later, the day of the playdate arrived. Inko had meticulously prepared the living room, filling it with age-appropriate toys and snacks. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath and opened the door to reveal Mitsuki and a babbling Katsuki, who was already reaching out to grab the doorframe. Izuku looked up from his play mat, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the familiar toddler. Izuku's body quivered with excitement as Katsuki was set down on the floor. Though he was still too young to fully grasp the concept of friendship, Izuku felt a bond with Kaken that was undeniable. Memories of their past lives as classmates and rivals flooded back to him, and he was overjoyed to see the fiery spirit he knew so well again. As they played together, Izuku was careful not to let his true self show too much, but it was clear that Katsuki sensed something different about him. The moment Izuku saw Katsuki's fiery eyes, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. Despite the vast differences in their current forms, he couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. He watched as Kaken's tiny hands grabbed onto the rattles and blocks with the same determination he had seen in battles long ago. The sight brought a gentle smile to his face, a rare expression for a baby, which Inko found oddly endearing. The playdate was a whirlwind of laughter and chaos, as Katsuki's boundless energy filled the room. Izuku couldn't help but feel a deep sense of joy as he watched his friend, his rival, his comrade from a life that felt like a distant dream, explore and interact with the world around him. Despite his new limitations, the bond they had formed in their past lives remained strong, a silent understanding that transcended the boundaries of time and existence. As the two babies played together, Izuku found himself reminiscing about their first class at UA high school, the fiery determination in Kaken's eyes, and the fierce competitive spirit that had driven them both to become the heroes they were destined to be. He had missed that fire, that passion that burned so brightly within his friend. Now, as he observed Katsuki's unbridled curiosity and enthusiasm, he was filled with hope for what their future might hold. Izuku was cautious, though. He knew that revealing his true nature would only lead to complications, to say nothing of the risk it posed to Katsuki and Mitsuki. He had to remain a baby for now, but the time would come when he would need to step up and be the hero he was meant to be. In the meantime, he was content to watch Katsuki grow, knowing that he would one day be by his side again, fighting for justice and protecting the world from those who threatened it. The days passed, and the two babies grew closer. Inko noticed that whenever Katsuki was around, Izuku's eyes seemed to light up with a particular spark, as if he recognized something special in the little boy with the explosive temperament. Katsuki, for his part, seemed to sense something in Izuku, often reaching for his hand or trying to share his toys, despite his usual disdain for sharing. During one of their playdates, as Izuku and Katsuki sat side by side in their little chairs, munching on pureed peas, something strange happened. A bird outside the window caught Katsuki's attention, and he pointed, exclaiming, "Birdie." Izuku's heart swelled, and a gentle smile played on his lips as he patted Katsuki's head in a soft, comforting gesture. It was a simple action, one that any parent might do to soothe their child, but to Izuku, it was so much more. It was a silent promise, a bond of friendship that transcended lifetimes, and a reminder of the camaraderie they had once shared. Mitsuki looked on with curiosity as she saw Izuku's tender interaction with her son. She had never seen such a gentle side to the usually stoic baby. "He's quite a special child, isn't he?" she murmured to Inko, who nodded in agreement, her eyes misty with unshed tears. As the two babies grew, so did their bond. Playdates turned into weekly rituals, and they became inseparable. Izuku found himself looking forward to these moments more than he had ever anticipated, a stark contrast to the solitary life he had led as a hero. He watched with bated breath as Katsuki's quirk began to manifest, the same explosive power that had once terrified and inspired him. He was definitely going to miss this once he had to go back to fighting villains and risking lives. But for now, he cherished these moments of innocence and purity. The weeks rolled into months, and Izuku's anticipation grew with each passing day. He watched as Katsuki's quirk became more prominent, the small explosions becoming more frequent and powerful. Inko had noticed the changes in her son as well, torn between fear for his safety and excitement for the future. One evening, as Izuku lay in his crib, contemplating the world he was about to re-enter, his mother entered the room. She looked at him with a mix of love and concern, her eyes searching for answers she wasn't quite ready to ask for. He simply stared. The silence grew heavy between them, the only sound the soft rustling of Izuku's blankets as he held himself still, trying to appear as innocent as any other baby. Inko took a deep breath and spoke softly, "Izuku, my love, I know something's different about you. I've felt it since the day you were born, and I see it more every day. Your eyes, they're so much like your father's, filled with a strength and wisdom that seems impossible for someone so young." Her words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Izuku's facade wavered. He longed to tell her everything, to confess his true identity and the burden he carried. But he knew the truth was too much for her to handle. Instead, he offered a gentle smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mama," he whispered, his voice still that of a child. Inko's heart ached at the sound of his baby's voice. "What is it, my sweet boy?" she asked, leaning closer to him, her hand gently brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "I'm here to help, Mama," Izuku said, his eyes filled with a determination that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "I promise." Inko felt a lump form in her throat. She knew her son was special, but she had no idea to what extent. Her mind raced with questions she didn't dare voice. Was this the quirk he had inherited? Was it something else entirely? Whatever it was, she knew that her baby was destined for greatness. The months turned to a year, and the playdates with Katsuki continued. As they grew, so did their quirks. Izuku's ever-changing quirk remained a secret, a tool that he honed in the quiet moments when he was alone. Inko noticed that her son's eyes never left Katsuki's side for long. There was something about the little boy with the explosive temper that called to Izuku, something that spoke to the hero within him. And as the two toddled around the living room, their laughter and occasional squabbles echoing through the air, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Their bond was undeniable, and she knew that it would shape the course of their lives. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the world they knew was about to change, that the peace they had fought so hard to maintain was hanging by a thread. As she watched them play, she whispered a silent prayer to whatever power had granted her son a second chance. "Please," she murmured, "let him grow up happy, let him live a life free from the shadows of his past. Let him be the hero he was born to be." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. As the seasons changed and the two boys grew, so did the whispers of a new threat. It was subtle at first, a rumble in the distance that grew louder with each passing day. Inko tried to keep Izuku shielded from the outside world, but she knew that it was only a matter of time before the truth would come knocking on their door. When it did, she would have to prepare her son for the battles ahead, to teach him the lessons of his past life, and to ensure that he didn't make the same mistakes twice. Because even in this new beginning, the specter of the past loomed large, a constant reminder of the destiny that awaited him. Izuku felt the shift in the air, the tension that grew with each passing week. He knew that the time to reveal himself was approaching, the moment when he would have to step out of the shadows and into the light once again. He was ready to be a hero, ready to use his new quirk to its full potential. But he was also scared. Scared of what it meant to have a quirk that was so powerful, yet so unpredictable. Scared of the responsibility that came with it. And scared of what might happen if he failed. So he waited, biding his time, preparing for the inevitable. In the quiet moments before the storm, he held on to the promise he had made to his mother, the promise that burned in his heart like a beacon in the darkness. He would be there for Katsuki, no matter what. He would be the hero he was meant to be, not just for his mother, not just for his father, but for all the people who had placed their trust in him. He would use his mutating quirk not just to understand quirks, but to learn from them and to become something greater than the sum of his parts. One sunny afternoon, as the two toddlers played in the sandbox, a strange aura enveloped Izuku's sight. His eyes grew wide as he felt the familiar sound of a mission notification. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced in his first life, but it was clear that the universe had a new task for him. The message was simple: your friend Katsuki needs your help, quell his rage. Izuku looked at Katsuki, who was blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation. His heart raced as he tried to process the implications. This was going to be difficult. Izuku watched Katsuki carefully, the weight of his newfound mission pressing down on his young shoulders. The child's uncontrolled bursts of noticeable anger grew more frequent, hinting at the immense power that lay dormant within him. It was clear that the time to act was approaching. He had to find a way to help his friend without revealing his true identity. One particularly stormy day, as the thunder crashed outside and the rain pattered against the windows, Katsuki's frustration grew as he lost a toy to a particularly stubborn knot in a plastic wrapper. His frustration escalated, and Izuku knew he had to act. He approached Katsuki slowly, his eyes reflecting the calmness of a seasoned hero despite his baby body. Reaching out a small hand, Izuku touched Katsuki's arm, and the room grew eerily quiet. The tension eased as Katsuki's explosive outburst subsided. In that moment, Izuku embraced him, offering a silent comfort that seemed to resonate with the troubled child. The warmth of his hug soothed Katsuki, and for the first time since his rebirth, Izuku felt a flicker of his old power stir within him, a gentle warmth that promised he could make a difference. Days turned into weeks, and Katsuki's moments of rage became less frequent. One day, he received a notification: Katsuki's rage is now at normal levels. He will now simply be cocky, reward, shift, the ability to telepathically move themselves or objects up to twice the user's current height. Horn antler growth may occur as a result. Izuku felt a strange sense of pride swell in his chest as he noticed two tiny bumps forming on his head. It was an unexpected development, but it made a peculiar kind of sense. The universe had granted him a quirk that grew with every encounter, and now it was evolving in a way that was both bizarre and fascinating. He reached up and felt the bumps gently. They were firm and smooth, almost like the beginnings of antler or horn buds. He had never seen anything quite like it, but he knew it was a sign that his power was growing, adapting to the new challenges ahead. Then he received another notification: Quirks Shift and Onibi Sentinel are now merged. Quirk Fusion result, ONI Sentinel. Izuku stared at the screen in amazement, his eyes widening at the prospect of what he had just created. Oni Sentinel, the name alone sent chills down his spine. As he sat in wonder, contemplating his newfound power, the door creaked open. Inko walked in, a gentle smile on her lips as she looked at her son. However, her expression quickly changed when she noticed the two bumps on his forehead. Izuku, what are these? She asked, approaching him with a mix of concern and curiosity. Izuku looked up at her, his eyes sparkling with excitement. It's okay, Mama, he said, reaching up to touch the bumps, trying to reassure her. Inko felt a pang of anxiety. We'll see about that, she murmured, deciding not to alarm him yet. She gently picked up Izuku and cradled him in her arms, feeling the skin around his new bumps. They were surprisingly hard, unlike anything she had ever felt before. She knew this was not a typical development for a baby, perhaps it was something related to his quirk. Making a decision, Inko resolved to seek professional help if the bumps persisted. As the days passed and the bumps remained, her worry grew stronger. Despite Izuku's innocent attempts at reassurance, she couldn't ignore that his condition was far from typical. After much deliberation, she decided it was time to take him to the hospital to see if anything was wrong. The day of the appointment arrived, and Inko dressed Izuku in a cute outfit, trying to put on a brave face despite her fears. As they entered the brightly lit hospital, the smells and sounds brought back memories of her own youthful days, when she had wished for nothing more than a super-strong quirk. Izuku, however, felt differently. He experienced a strange sense of déjà vu, as if he were about to face a challenge that she had encountered before. "Hello, Mrs. Midoriya. And this young man is Izuku Midoriya, I presume," a doctor greeted them. Izuku's heart sank. He recognized this hospital all too well. When he looked up, his worst fears were realized. In the bustling hospital, Inko followed the doctor's directions, carrying Izuku in her arms as they approached the pediatrician's office. The nameplate on the door read, Dr. Tsubasa. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as memories of his past life flooded back. The man who had once been Kyudai Garaki, all for one's infamous doctor, now greeted them with a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His demeanor was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated man Izuku remembered from his battles against the villainous organization. Now, he was simply Dr. Tsubasa, a man who seemed to want to help children. As Inko began to explain Izuku's condition, Dr. Tsubasa's gaze lingered on the bumps, his smile slipping for a brief moment before he regained his composure. Izuku felt his thoughts racing, his heart thumping wildly in his chest. This was the man who had saved All for One from his first fight with All Might, who had experimented on many without mercy. What would he think of the anomalies on Izuku's forehead? The doctor examined Izuku with a gentle touch, his eyes narrowing as he felt the bumps beneath the baby's soft skin. He had to keep his cool, not letting on that he knew the true nature of his mother's concern. He couldn't let this man know his secret, not yet. Dr. Tsubasa's smile never wavered as he assured Inko that the bumps were just a benign growth, likely a result of a mild genetic mutation. He recommended monitoring them, but otherwise, there was no cause for alarm. As Inko nodded, visibly relieved, Izuku couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear. The man who had been a part of his darkest battles was now responsible for his health. It was a twist of fate that made him feel as if he were walking on a tightrope with no safety net below. With the appointment over, Inko carried Izuku out of the hospital, her eyes scanning the surroundings with newfound vigilance. Despite the doctor's reassurances, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As they stepped into the fresh air, Izuku felt a weight lift from his chest. He had survived the encounter without revealing his true nature. But as they walked home, his thoughts grew heavy once more. He had to find a way to use Oni Sentinel to protect those he cared about, to ensure that Japan and the wider world did not fall into darkness again. The bumps on his forehead grew more pronounced with each step, a silent declaration of the power that now resided within him. It was a power that could change the course of history if used correctly. As the rain began to fall again, mixing with the tears he had held back, Izuku made a promise to himself. He would become the hero that his mother had always seen in him. He would stand as the Oni Sentinel, a guardian of peace and justice in a world that had forgotten what true heroism meant. He would do it all without the need for the spotlight, without the burden of being the symbol of peace. For now, he was just a baby with a quirk that made him a little bit different. But deep down, Izuku knew that he was much more than that. He was a force of nature, a beacon of hope in a world that needed saving. With Katsuki by his side, he was ready to face whatever the future had in store. The rain grew heavier, washing away the fear and uncertainty of the past. As they arrived home, Inko held Izuku a little tighter, whispering words of love and protection into his ear. Inside the warm embrace of their home, Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the power of Oni Sentinel pulsing within him. It was time to begin his new life as a hero, a life filled with challenges and growth, a life where he would learn to wield his quirk with care and precision. As the storm raged on outside, a quiet determination grew within him, a flame that would never be extinguished. The world was about to meet a hero like no other, one who would fight not just for the sake of fighting, but for the future of everyone he loved. As the days grew warmer and closer to his first birthday on July 15th, Izuku found himself becoming increasingly worried about the numerous pieces of his last life. The horns on his forehead had grown to be quite noticeable, but Inko had become accustomed to them, seeing them as a unique part of her son's charm rather than a source of concern. The anticipation of his birthday was palpable, not just for the celebrations but for the impending arrival of his Plus Ultra package, a gift from the universe for his first year of life. He knew it would be something significant, something that could change everything. Izuku watched as his mother meticulously prepared for the party, inviting friends and family, all the while keeping an eye on her son and his mysterious growth. On the morning of his birthday, Izuku felt the usual warmth of his mother's embrace as she whispered, "Happy birthday, my little hero," and placed a gentle kiss on his forehead. He looked into her eyes and wished that he could tell her everything, but he knew he had to protect her from the truth. The universe had granted him a second chance, but it came with a responsibility that she could never fully understand. The party was a delightful whirlwind of balloons, laughter, and cake. Katsuki was there, as energetic as ever, seemingly oblivious to the monumental changes happening in his best friend's life. As they played together, Izuku couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness, knowing that he would have to keep his true self hidden even from him. But the time for gifts soon approached, and as the guests gathered around him, Izuku felt his heart race. Inko handed him a beautifully wrapped box, her eyes filled with love and hope. He took a deep breath and opened it, revealing an All Might onesie, a reminder of the hero he once admired. The room grew quiet as Izuku's eyes watered, not with sadness, but with joy. It was as if the universe had sent him a message, a symbol of the heroic spirit that still burned within him. He looked up and saw the smiles on the faces of his mother and Katsuki, and he couldn't help but laugh through his tears. He had been granted a new life, a chance to start over, and he was going to cherish it. In that moment, he felt a warmth spread through his body, and the horns on his forehead grew a little more pronounced. He knew that the Oni Sentinel was preparing for what was to come, acknowledging his unwavering resolve to become a hero once more. As the party continued, Izuku played with his new toys, his heart swelling with happiness. But as the last guest left and the house grew quiet, he looked at his mother, his eyes filled with a determination she had never seen before. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "I want to be a hero." Inko's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly composed herself, nodding with a smile. "I knew you would say that," she replied, her voice filled with pride and relief. She had always known that her son had a special destiny, and she would support him every step of the way. The room grew silent as they shared a knowing look. The path ahead was fraught with unknowns, but Izuku was ready to face them with the courage and conviction that had defined his past life. His mother's belief in him was a beacon that guided him, a reminder that no matter what quirks he held, he was born to be a hero. As the sun set on his first birthday in this new life, Izuku cried tears of joy. He had been given a gift beyond measure, a chance to rewrite his story, to be the hero he was always meant to be. With Oni Sentinel by his side and the love of his mother to guide him, he knew that no obstacle would ever be too great. As Inko tucked him into bed, she noticed the horns had grown slightly larger, almost as if responding to his declaration. She caressed them gently, a silent promise to support him through the trials that lay ahead. Izuku looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the flicker of the candle on the nightstand, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." The notification chimed in the quiet of the night, jolting Izuku out of his thoughts. It was a birthday message from the universe itself, a gentle reminder of the power he now possessed. The message read, "Happy first birthday, Izuku Midoriya. As a gift, you get a new quirk. Quirk, Lizard has now been merged with Oni Sentinel, quirk fusion result, Imori Guard. Congratulations on surviving this far." Izuku's eyes grew wide with shock and excitement. He had never expected such a gift. "Imori Guard," he murmured, feeling the power surge through his body. He could feel the scales of Lizard and the unyielding strength of Oni Sentinel melding together, creating a formidable barrier around him. He had to test it, to understand the extent of his new abilities. Rushing to the backyard, Izuku called upon the might of Imori Guard, his body transforming before his very eyes. His horns grew more prominent, a tail sprouted from his lower back, and his skin became a mix of scales and rock-like armor. His mother watched from the window, her heart racing with a mix of fear and awe. The power was overwhelming, but he had to mstr it. He focused on a distant memory of the first time All Might had entrusted him with One for All, channeling that same courage into his newfound form. The transformation was successful, and Izuku felt the unmistakable sensation of his quirks working in unison. He could feel the heat of his surroundings, a nod to thermal sense, and the sticky residue of sticky fingers on his new scales. The echo chameleon aspect of his quirk allowed him to mimic the sounds of the night, while Emori Guard gave him an unprecedented level of protection. He was a force to be reckoned with, a hero who could blend into the shadows and emerge when needed, a true guardian of peace. The enhancement to his echo quirk was immediate and natural. His reptilian ears picked up sounds with uncanny precision, and his ability to mimic them was now almost effortless. It was as if he had been born with the power of the lizard, the quirk integrating with his very being. The chameleon aspect of his quirk was also heightened, his scales shifted and changed color, allowing him to blend into his environment with astonishing ease. It was the perfect disguise for a hero who didn't seek the spotlight. With his newfound instincts, Izuku felt a surge of sneakiness that came naturally to him. He slithered through the grass, his movements eerily silent and fluid, like a lizard stalking its prey. The combination of Echo Chameleon and Emori Guard had made him instinctively sneakier, a trait that would serve him well in his future endeavors. He could now navigate the city unnoticed, listening in on conversations and gathering information that could be crucial to saving lives. The potential of his quirk was vast, and Izuku's mind raced with the possibilities. He could copy the sounds of sirens to lead people to safety or mimic the roar of a creature to scare off attackers. The Echo Chameleon aspect made his Emori Guard quirk even more powerful, allowing him to blend in while also having the element of surprise. It was a good balance of stealth and might, a combination that could make him a formidable hero, one who could support those in need without the weight of expectation that came with being the symbol of peace. As he continued to explore his new abilities, Izuku felt the power within him growing stronger. The universe had granted him a second gift, a hidden state within Emori Guard. This was the body bulk aspect of his quirk, and it came with two distinct forms. The first was the lizardman state, which retained his human-like height and build but enhanced his agility and stealth. His scales shimmered with a vibrant green hue, and his muscles rippled with the grace of a predatory lizard. This form allowed him to move with unparalleled speed and silence, clinging to walls and ceilings as if he were a creature born of the shadows. The animalistic grace of the lizard complemented his Echo Chameleon abilities, making him a MSTR of the urban jungle. The true revelation came when he discovered the wearing state dragon mode. This form was a sight to behold, his body swelling with power and his features taking on a more draconic appearance. His horns grew long and spiked, his eyes burned with intensity, and his tail became a powerful extension of himself. His skin was a mix of scales and rock-like armor, even more impenetrable than before, and the ends of his limbs became formidable. In this state, Izuku's strength and speed were amplified to incredible levels. He could unleash a powerful breath attack, a terrifying addition to his repertoire. His abilities allowed him to incapacitate his enemies without causing harm. The transformation was a testament to the sheer might of Emori Guard. However, with great power came great responsibility. Izuku knew that this form was not to be used lightly. The potential for destruction was immense, and he feared the consequences of losing control. He would practice tirelessly, continuously pushing the limits of his new form, learning to harness the power without succumbing to it. Each transformation was a battle with his inner self, a struggle to maintain his humanity amidst the primal instincts that now coursed through his veins. In quiet moments, when he wasn't focused on training or exploring his new abilities, Izuku wondered about the future. What would the world think of a hero who could become a creature of the night, a being that could blend in and strike without warning? He knew that the path ahead was fraught with challenges, that he would have to navigate the fine line between heroism and the fear that his new form could inspire. But he was determined to use Imori Guard for good, to be a beacon of hope for those who had none. He thought back to before his first year at UA high school, to the time when he had first met All Might, the man who had inspired him to become a hero. The memory of their first encounter was vivid, as All Might had seen something in him that convinced him to pass on the great responsibility of one for all. Now, Izuku had been granted a new tool, one that was entirely his own, and he would not squander it. He knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed to build a network of allies, a team that could support him in his new role. His thoughts turned to the students at UA, to the friends he had made, and the enemies he had faced. Would they recognize him in his new form? Could they trust him, knowing the power that he now wielded? With these questions swirling in his mind, Izuku turned his gaze to the night sky, where the stars twinkled like the dreams of the heroes he had once aspired to be. He knew he had to keep his new identity a secret, not just to protect himself, but to protect those around him. The weight of his decision was heavy on his shoulders, but he was not alone. He had his mother, and he had the spirit of All Might within him, a spirit that had never truly left. Izuku felt a newfound sense of purpose, a burning drive to protect and serve. He understood that Imori Guard was not just a quirk, it was a part of him now, demanding discipline and control. In the coming months, he would train relentlessly, pushing his body and mind to the brink to ensure he could handle the power within him. He needed to be ready for the battles that were sure to come, for the enemies lurking in the shadows of society, waiting for their moment to strike. As time passed, Izuku's resolve grew stronger. His mother watched him from afar, her heart swelling with pride as she saw the dedication and perseverance that had always been a part of her son. She knew he would face trials and tribulations, but she had faith he would emerge from them a hero. As Izuku approached his 4th birthday in this new life, where he would finally awaken his quirk and be able to train it, the anticipation grew palpable. His mother, Inko, noticed his intense focus and the way he studied his environment, as if searching for clues to unlock the secrets of his quirk. She knew the day was approaching when he would need her guidance more than ever before. He also had to set things in motion for a better future. With his maturity, he had been given access to a computer for his 3rd birthday. While he let his mother believe he was watching videos about heroes, he had been using it to reach out to a certain classmate. But enough of that, it was nearing the time for his and Katsuki's quirks to awaken. With Imori Guard at his disposal, Izuku knew he had to be prepared to face his former rival with a new set of skills. His heart raced at the thought of a potential clash between them, but he pushed those thoughts aside. For now, he had to ensure he could control the power within him, that he could be the hero he was destined to be without letting the power consume him. As the days grew longer and the nights warmer, the whispers of the impending first quirk activation of his best friend grew louder in Izuku's mind. He knew that Katsuki's quirk would be a game-changer, and the anticipation was almost too much to bear. He had to be ready, not just for his own sake but for Katsuki's as well. The day finally arrived. As the sun rose, the two friends found themselves in the usual park, surrounded by the whispers of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Katsuki looked at Izuku with a mix of excitement and nerves, his eyes wide with anticipation. He exclaimed that it would be any day now, and he would finally get to see how cool his quirk was. Then, the moment came like a bolt of lightning. Katsuki's hands erupted in a fiery explosion, the air crackling with energy. When the flames died down, he stood there, fists ablaze with a fiery aura. His eyes met Izuku's, a smug grin spreading across his face as he boasted about his entrance. Suddenly, the sound of laughter pierced through the quiet of the park. A group of teens approached, their eyes fixed on Izuku. Katsuki's grin faded as he recognized the signs of trouble. Izuku tensed up, readying himself for what was to come. One of the teens sneered, pointing at Izuku and making a hurtful comment about his appearance. The leader of the group, a tall, burly teen, stepped closer to Izuku, taunting him further. The mention of his father ignited a spark of anger within Izuku. The primal rage that had laid dormant surged to the surface, and he felt the power of Imori Guard stirring within him. As he felt the intensity of his emotions, a notification buzzed in his mind, announcing a new quirk for him. Izuku's eyes widened as he felt his body change, muscles bulking up and skin turning a deep, shadowy green. His quirk had activated. Looking down at his hands, he saw sharp, clawed appendages, a stark contrast to his human form. His clothes had ripped away, replaced by scales that gleamed like dark emeralds in the morning light. He had grown taller and more robust, and the horns on his forehead had lengthened, hinting at the power within him. His eyes had become piercing crimson slits, and his teeth had elongated. The bullies took a collective step back, their bravado vanishing in the face of the monstrous form that now stood before them. Katsuki, his own quirk ablaze, looked at Izuku in amazement, questioning what had just happened. Izuku responded, his voice a low growl, introducing his new quirk. He looked at the trio of bullies, their eyes wide with fear, and declared it was time for them to learn some manners. The bullies didn't wait for another word, they turned and ran, their sneers forgotten in the face of the transformation Izuku had undergone. Katsuki watched them flee, still in shock, and Izuku confirmed that it was indeed his quirk that had changed. He took a deep breath, focusing on the power coursing through his body. With a conscious effort, he felt the scales recede, his horns shrinking back to their usual size, and his clothes mending themselves. It's called Kappa Guard. I can manipulate my body into something other, he explained, his voice returning to normal. Katsuki stared at him, his own quirk still flickering. That's incredible, he breathed. What can it do? I don't know, not fully, Izuku admitted, his heart still racing. But I have a feeling we're going to find out. He offered a small smile, trying to ease the tension that hung in the air. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. But I know it's going to make us stronger. The two friends stood in the quiet park, the echoes of their earlier excitement replaced by a newfound understanding of the world they were about to enter. They had always dreamed of becoming heroes, but now, with these new abilities, the stakes felt higher than ever. Izuku knew that with great power came great responsibility, and he was determined to use his quirk wisely. But even as he thought of the future, the whispers of his past life remained. The battles he had fought, the enemies he had faced, the lives he had saved. He knew that he could not ignore the lessons of his previous life, that he had to be vigilant, always prepared for what might come next. Let's go, he said finally, his voice firm. We'll probably get in trouble if we stay here much longer. The two of them took off, their hearts still racing from the unexpected turn of events. As they ran, Izuku couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced around, his heightened senses on alert, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Katsuki, on the other hand, seemed to have forgotten the incident already, his mind racing with the possibilities of his own quirk. We've got to tell someone about this, he exclaimed. This is huge, Izuku. We could be the next big thing. Izuku nodded, wanna see how I do against your blasts? Katsuki's eyes lit up, bring it on. The two of them charged at each other, a fiery explosion met with a flash of green scales and a powerful roar. The air around them distorted with the collision of their quirks, the flames of Katsuki's explosion quirk clashing against the shield that Izuku had formed with his Kappa Guard. The force of the impact sent the bullies fleeing even further, their taunts forgotten in the face of the overwhelming display of power. As the smoke cleared, the two friends stood panting, grinning from ear to ear. They had done it. They had activated their quirks. They had taken the first step towards their dreams. But Izuku knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead was fraught with challenges, and he had to be ready for whatever the world threw at him. We need to tell our parents, Izuku said, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. Yeah, right, Katsuki nodded, his eyes still alight with the thrill of battle. But we can't just go around blasting everything. We have to be careful. Katsuki knew Izuku was right. They had to learn to control their powers, and quickly. The potential for destruction was immense, and they couldn't risk hurting anyone, especially not after what they had just done to the bullies. The two of them agreed to keep their newfound abilities a secret for now, focusing on training in private. Izuku couldn't wait to show his mother, though. He knew she would be overjoyed to see that he had not only awakened a quirk but had been granted something so incredibly powerful. As they arrived home, Izuku's heart pounded in his chest, the anticipation building. He found Inko in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. The sight of her brought a warmth to his heart, a reminder of the love and comfort she had provided him all his life. He took a deep breath and called out to her, "Mom, I need to show you something." She turned around, a smile on her face, and her eyes widened when she saw Izuku's transformed state. "Izuku, what happened to you?" she gasped, taking a step back. The kitchen lights reflected off his scales, casting an unusual glow in the room. "It's okay, Mom," he assured her, his voice still deep and resonant. "This is my quirk. I call it Kappa Guard." He began to explain the merging process, the system's notification, and the newfound power within him. Inko's expression shifted from shock to amazement, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Inko stared at her son, the fear slowly dissipating from her eyes as she processed the gravity of the situation. She had always known that Izuku was special, but this was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. "Izuku," she breathed, her voice trembling slightly. "This is incredible." Izuku's smile grew wider as he watched his mother's reaction. He had always dreamed of making her proud, and now, with Kappa Guard at his disposal, he knew that he could do just that. He took a step closer to her, his clawed hands outstretched. "It's okay, Mom," he assured her. "I can control it." With a gentle touch, Izuku transformed back into his human form, the scales receding and the horns shrinking until he was once again the boy she knew and loved. Inko's eyes filled with tears as she reached out and took his hand, her heart swelling with pride. "My little hero," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew you would do great things." The two of them stood in the kitchen, the aroma of dinner forgotten as they shared a moment of pure joy and wonder. Izuku knew that his mother would support him in this new chapter of his life, just as she had in the old one. With her by his side, he felt invincible, ready to tackle whatever the world had in store for him. But the reality of their situation quickly set in. Inko's eyes grew serious as she looked at him. "We need to get your quirk registered." "Yeah," Izuku nodded, his excitement tempered by the gravity of the situation. They got ready, Izuku changing into a clean school uniform to hide his true form. Afterwards, they headed to the local Hero Association branch, where they were greeted by a friendly receptionist who took down their details. The process was surprisingly quick and painless, the system seemingly designed to be efficient for the high volume of quirk manifestations that occurred daily. As they waited for their turn, Izuku couldn't help but feel a sense of amazement. He hadn't been here before, but he knew the drill from his past life. Kids with quirks were registered into a database, and their abilities were catalogued and studied. It was a necessary part of a world where quirks were the norm. But this time, it was different. He had something truly unique, something that could change the game. The receptionist called their names, and they followed her down a hallway lined with doors, each leading to a private examination room. Izuku felt a knot in his stomach as they approached the room where he would demonstrate his new quirk. What would the examiner think of Kappa Guard? Would they be as impressed as he was? The room was stark, with only a few pieces of equipment and a large, open space for the demonstration. The examiner, a stern-looking woman with a quirk that allowed her to manipulate eye color, nodded curtly at them as they entered. "Good afternoon, Midoriya-kun," she said, her eyes scanning over the paperwork in front of her. "I understand you've had quite the breakthrough." "Yes, ma'am," Izuku replied, his nerves evident. He could feel Katsuki's excitement radiating off of him, a stark contrast to his own trepidation. "Very well, let's begin," she said, her voice brisk and professional. "Please, activate your quirk." With a deep breath, Izuku focused his thoughts, and the transformation took hold. The scales emerged, the horns grew, and the claws extended, yet he felt weaker. Was that the Deviljo aspect of his quirk? Katsuki couldn't help but let out a whistle of amazement, drawing a glare from the examiner. The woman studied him closely, her gaze intense as she took notes. Impressive, she murmured, her tone still unreadable. Your control seems quite adept for someone who's just manifested. Izuku nodded, his heart racing as he prepared for the next phase. Thank you, he managed, his voice still a low growl. He knew he had to be careful with his words in this form. All right, let's move on to the practical exam, she said, her eyes never leaving him. You'll need to show us how else you can use your quirk. They got ready to go, Izuku's mind racing with strategy. He had never used Kappa Guard in a real fight before, only against Katsuki in that playful spar. He knew he had to be careful not to reveal too much of his past knowledge, lest he draw suspicion. The practical exam began with a series of simple tests, dodging projectiles, lifting weights, and breaking through barriers. Each time, Kappa Guard performed flawlessly, the scales and horns adapting to whatever challenge was thrown his way. The examiner's eyes grew wider with each feat, and even Katsuki looked at him with newfound respect. But it was the final test that truly showcased the depth of Izuku's quirk. The examiner sent a barrage of quirks at him, simulating a real battle scenario. Without missing a beat, Izuku transformed into Kappa Guard and went invisible, his scales blending perfectly with the environment. His thermal sense kicked in, allowing him to track the movements of the attackers by their heat signatures. As they approached, he struck, his sticky fingers grabbing onto them. The room was soon a whirlwind of chaos, with the examiner and Katsuki watching in awe. Izuku's echo chameleon aspect allowed him to mimic the sounds of his opponents. The examiner nodded, clearly impressed. Your quirk is quite versatile, Midoriya-kun. But I suspect there's more to it than meets the eye. Can you show us any other aspects of your Kappa Guard? Izuku took a deep breath and focused his thoughts once more. The scales on his body began to ripple, and with a soft pop, his form shifted again. This time, his skin took on a slightly transparent quality, and his eyes grew large and round, mimicking the echo chameleon aspect of his quirk. I can also mimic the sounds of my targets, he explained. The examiner's eyes narrowed as she studied him, taking notes. Interesting, she said, her voice still calm and measured. I can also do this. With a roar, Izuku shifted again, and a burst of fire shot from his mouth, lighting up the room. The examiner jumped back in surprise, and even Katsuki took a step away from the blast. The fire was unlike any they had ever seen, a blue that danced and twisted in the air. It was a stark contrast to the fiery red and orange of Katsuki's own explosion quirk. The room grew hot, and the simulated attackers retreated, their movements becoming more frantic as the flames grew closer. Izuku's eyes searched for the source of the fire, his heart racing with excitement and fear. This was something new, something he hadn't anticipated. The fire grew larger, consuming everything in its path, and Izuku felt the heat on his skin, even through his quirk's natural defenses. His mind raced as he tried to understand this uncontrollable power. It was as if his quirk had a mind of its own, drawing from his deepest desires and fears to manifest in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the flames began to die down, the examiner coughed, her eyes wide with astonishment. That was something. Izuku looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of shock and determination. I didn't mean to do that, he said, his voice a bit shaky. It's the first time it's happened. The woman took a step closer to him, her gaze unwavering. Your quirk is powerful, Midoriya, she said, her tone no longer brisk but filled with wonder. You'll definitely be a pro hero with that quirk. Izuku felt a strange sense of pride, but also a hint of doubt. He had spent his entire life trying to prove that quirks weren't everything. With shift and fire breath at his disposal, he had become the epitome of what he had always feared, a hero who relied solely on power. He knew he had to be more than that, to honor the legacy he left behind. He would get back to training his body like it was before and after his time with One for All. He did know how to fight, but there was no need to get rusty, after all. "It's Katsuki's turn," the examiner said, her voice echoing in the now quiet room. Katsuki stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He had been waiting for this moment, to prove himself worthy of the title, hero, just like Izuku. The examiner looked at him expectantly, and Katsuki braced himself, calling upon the power of explosion. The room trembled as a burst of fiery red and orange shot from his hand, the force of the blast pushing the air aside. The walls of the exam room were reinforced to withstand such demonstrations, but even so, the heat was intense. "Impressive," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Your control is lacking, but you have a long time to improve on it. Now, let's see what else you can do with explosion." Katsuki grinned, eager to show off. He had spent countless hours pushing his quirk to its limits, creating new and innovative ways to use his explosive power. He understood that raw strength alone wouldn't make him a great hero, he needed finesse and strategy. As the examiner threw various objects at him, Katsuki dodged and weaved, his explosions accurately hitting every robotic target. His movements were swift and calculated, a stark contrast to the brute force he had once relied upon. Izuku watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride for his friend. Katsuki had come a long way from the hot-headed boy who believed might made right. "Thank you for both of your time," the examiner said as she concluded her notes. "We'll need to monitor the development of your quirks closely, but you both have incredible potential." They left the exam room, the weight of their newfound abilities pressing heavily upon them. Inko held onto Izuku's hand, her eyes wide with disbelief and excitement. "You're going to be amazing, Izuku," she said, her voice filled with hope. Izuku nodded, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities and responsibilities. The Kappa Guard quirk was something he hadn't anticipated, but he knew that with great power came great responsibility. He had to ensure that he used his abilities wisely, for the sake of everyone around him. As they made their way to the exit of the Hero Association building, the hustle and bustle of the city outside beckoned them. Stepping into the sunlight, Izuku felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. "Mom, I want to train." "I'll help you with that," Inko said with a knowing smile, her eyes shining with determination. She had always supported his dreams and wasn't about to let him face this new challenge alone. They found a local dojo that specialized in a unique combat style combining traditional martial arts. It was a perfect fit for Izuku, who had honed his fighting skills over years of experience. The sensei, a stoic man with a quirk that allowed him to manipulate metal, welcomed them without hesitation. He saw the potential in their eyes and knew that with the right guidance, they could become the heroes they aspired to be. Katsuki's eyes lit up as he watched the students spar, their quirks weaving in and out of the ancient martial art forms. He had always wanted to learn to fight, to channel his explosive power into something more than just brute strength. With Izuku by his side, he knew this was the perfect opportunity. The two of them began their training with fierce dedication. Under the watchful eye of the sensei, Izuku found that his body still remembered the moves from his past, responding almost instinctively. Yet, he knew he couldn't rely solely on his past skills. He had to adapt to the new quirks he now possessed, to become a hero who could stand on his own. Katsuki, on the other hand, soaked up every piece of knowledge thrown his way. He practiced tirelessly, pushing his explosion quirk to new limits. His fiery blasts grew more precise, and he learned to control the power surging through him. Izuku watched his friend's growth with admiration, reminded of his own early days under All Might's tutelage. The dojo became their sanctuary, a place where they could hone their abilities without fear of judgment or the pressure of the outside world. But amidst their rigorous training, Izuku couldn't shake off a feeling of dread about his past life. His mind kept wandering to his former classmate Yuga and the troubling thoughts about his parents' actions. With the hacking skills he had picked up in his last year at UA, Izuku accessed information in ways that were previously impossible for him. The sun had set, and the neon lights of the city painted the streets below in vibrant colors. In the quiet solitude of his room, Izuku sat before his computer, his mind racing. He had to know if his suspicions about Yuga's parents were true. Carefully, he hacked into the Aoima's phone lines, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. The digital world was a familiar playground, and he navigated it with ease. His heart pounded as he accessed their recent calls and messages, scanning for any shred of information that might confirm his suspicions. The conversation he found was chilling. Yuga's mother spoke in hushed tones about a meeting with a mysterious benefactor, someone who could grant them the key. The voice on the other end was cold and calculated, discussing the terms of their agreement with disturbing nonchalance. It was clear they were willing to go to any lengths to ensure their son's success. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. He had to act fast. If Yuga was about to be used as a pawn in a twisted game, it had to be stopped. But how could he do so without revealing his true identity? The digital footprints of his hack would be traceable, and he didn't want to put his new life at risk. He had to be smart, to think like the tactician he once was. The phone records showed that the Aoimas had been in contact with shady individuals, their conversations littered with coded language and veiled threats. Izuku felt a knot in his stomach as he pieced together the puzzle. It was clear they were desperate for Yuga to have a quirk, willing to make deals with the one man who could give them that, all for one. With a heavy heart, he decided to confront Yuga's parents. He had to find a way to save his friend from falling into the clutches of evil without revealing his true identity. He got his phone and started typing. Days turned into weeks, and Izuku's concern for Yuga grew. He continued to train at the dojo, pushing himself harder each day, hoping that his newfound skills would be enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Meanwhile, he kept tabs on the Aoimas through his digital surveillance, watching for any signs of trouble. One evening, as he sat in his room surrounded by the glow of his computer screen, an idea began to take root. If he couldn't confront Yuga's parents directly without risking exposure, he could still help from the shadows. He would become an information broker, feeding crucial intel to the underground network of pro-heroes who operated outside the public eye. These heroes often took on missions too sensitive or dangerous for the mainstream hero community. Izuku knew that if he could provide them with the right information, they could intervene before Yuga's life was irrevocably changed. He had connections from his past life, heroes who had seen the darker side of the Quirk world and operated under the radar. He decided to become an information broker for these underground pro-heroes, offering his unique insight and access to the digital world in exchange for their help in keeping an eye on the Aoimas. He started by reaching out to Sir Night-Eye, a hero he had met in his previous life, who had connections to the underground circuit. After several encrypted emails and cautious conversations, he began texting. He introduced himself as someone who had seen more than their fair share of darkness and claimed to know about one for all and all for one. He expressed a longing to stop the villain together. The pause in the conversation was significant before Sir Night-Eye replied, filled with skepticism and hope. He questioned how Izuku had gained access to such information. Izuku explained that he had the ability to see the future and wanted to help. He shared his concern about a young boy named Yuga Aoyama, whose parents were making a deal with All for One for him to gain a quirk, believing Yuga was about to be used as a pawn in a larger scheme. Sir Night-Eye took the claim seriously and asked why Izuku cared about the boy. Izuku replied that in his vision of the future, Yuga was in danger, and if they didn't act, it would lead to widespread ruin. After a moment of silence, Sir Night-Eye agreed to bring the information to attention but warned Izuku that he would find out who he was. With a smirk, Izuku ended the conversation, aware of the risks involved in his path. He had no intention of hiding his true identity from Night-Eye and Hero Society forever, but for now, he needed to be cautious. His heart was in the right place, and he was willing to take the necessary risks to ensure that Yuga didn't fall down the same path he had seen so many others take. Returning to his computer, Izuku dove deeper into the dark web to uncover any whispers about All for One's whereabouts or activities. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a silent symphony of clicks and taps that resonated through the quiet room. Suddenly, a notification popped up, announcing a new quirk, Daimon Kappa, which could boost other quirks to their maximum level for a short duration. This revelation sent a jolt of excitement through Izuku, as it meant he could also be a support-type hero. He reflected on Nitai's words about vigilantism, acknowledging the truth in them. In his heart, he was still a hero, even if he had to operate from the shadows for now. He needed to plan meticulously and strike decisively. The weight of his decision to use his power in this way settled heavily upon him, but he was resolute. With the revelation of Daimon Kappa, Izuku saw the potential to become something more than just an anonymous informant. He could be the hero that the underground needed, one who didn't rely on the spotlight or public recognition but instead operated from the shadows. His mind raced with possibilities, and he knew he had to prepare. Grabbing a notebook and pencil, Izuku began to sketch out ideas for his new vigilante identity. He wanted something that would strike fear into the hearts of evildoers while simultaneously inspiring hope in the innocent. He drew various designs, each more intricate than the last, considering the quirks he had merged. The combination of echo, chameleon, thermal sense, and soundwave allowed for a plethora of tactical options that would serve him well in his new role. The suit he envisioned was a stark contrast to his previous flamboyant hero outfit. This one was about blending in, about being unseen until the moment he needed to be seen. The color scheme was a mix of urban grays and blacks, with just a hint of green to match his new, Echo Chameleon, quirk. It was designed for stealth, allowing him to move through the shadows unnoticed. The material was lightweight yet durable, capable of withstanding the rigors of combat and invisibility. Izuku's hand hovered over his notebook, pencil poised to bring his new identity to life. He understood that the key to a good vigilante costume was to strike the perfect balance between functionality and symbolism. Now he just needed the supplies to make it. The following day, Izuku ventured into the city under the guise of going to the neighborhood park. In reality, he had a specific mission in mind, to acquire the materials needed to create his new vigilante costume. He had saved up enough money from his birthdays and his allowance to visit a local tailor, a man known for his discretion and ability to work with unconventional fabrics. Izuku had done his homework and knew he could trust this man with his secret. He approached the shop with a sense of urgency, the weight of his decision propelling him forward. The tailor looked up from his work, a knowing smile playing on his lips as he recognized the determination in the young boy's eyes. "What can I do for you, young man?" he asked, his voice a gentle rumble. Izuku slid the notebook across the counter, revealing his meticulously drawn designs. "I need a costume," he said simply. "One that can help me make a difference without drawing too much attention to myself." The tailor studied the drawings, nodding thoughtfully. "I see," he murmured. "A costume of the shadows, for a hero of the night." He paused for a moment before speaking again. "I will need the exact specifications of your quirk to ensure that the suit enhances your abilities without hindering them." Izuku took a deep breath, explaining his Daimon Kappa quirk. The tailor listened intently, his eyes lighting up with understanding. "Ah, a clever combination," he mused. "The Echo Chameleon will serve you well, but beware of the strain it can put on your body." They spent hours discussing the intricacies of the design, selecting fabrics that could withstand the rigors of combat while maintaining the stealth required for his new role. The tailor promised to have the costume ready within the week, a timeframe that made Izuku's heart race with anticipation. With the costume in progress, Izuku turned his attention to training. He knew that his quirk alone would not be enough to ensure success. He needed to hone his body and mind, pushing himself to the limits of his endurance. He spent long hours at the dojo, perfecting his agility and speed. He practiced his newfound abilities, blending in with his surroundings and echoing sounds to create diversions. The potential of his quirk grew clearer with each training session, and he could feel the power surging within him. As he trained, Izuku couldn't help but think of All Might, his mentor and the man who had passed on One for All. He wondered what his hero would think of his choice to become a vigilante. Would he be proud, or would he see it as a breaking of the trust he had placed in him? The thought brought a pang of sadness, but Izuku pushed it aside. He knew that the world was changing, and sometimes, the rules had to be bent to ensure justice prevailed. The week passed by in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Each night, he lay in bed, eyes wide open, planning out potential scenarios and strategies. His mind raced with the excitement of his new life, the thrill of the unknown. When the tailor finally called to say the costume was ready, Izuku could barely contain his excitement. He rushed to the shop, his heart pounding in his chest. The costume was better than he could have imagined. It fit like a second skin, melding perfectly with his body's contours. The mask, a simple yet elegant piece, allowed him to breathe easily while obscuring his identity. The final piece of his new identity was a utility belt, packed with makeshift gadgets and tools that would complement his quirk. He had spent countless hours in his room, tinkering away, creating devices that would allow him to blend into the urban landscape while also being prepared for any situation. The moment he donned the costume, something within Izuku shifted. He no longer felt like the same person who had once aspired to be the greatest hero. He had become something else entirely, something new and untested. The weight of the mask on his face was a stark reminder of the responsibility he had taken on, the secret he now had to protect. That night, as the city of Muzutafu grew quiet and the moon cast its glow, Izuku took to the rooftops. The Daimon Kappa aspect of his quirk allowed him to blend into the darkness, his lizard man form allowing him to appear about 6 feet tall. His heart thumped in his chest with every silent step he took. He felt the air pressure shift around him as he practiced controlling his newfound ability to manipulate the temperature of his surroundings. The city was a labyrinth of shadows and light, and he moved through it with newfound grace. He had spent hours memorizing the layout of the city, using his Daimon Kappa to study the movements of the local heroes and villains alike. His goal was to understand the balance of power, to find the perfect moment to intervene without revealing his true identity. As he moved from rooftop to rooftop, he couldn't help but feel the thrill of his newfound anonymity. He was no longer the symbol of peace, he was the invisible guardian of order. As he patrolled, his thermal sense detected an unusual heat signature coming from an alleyway below. His heart raced as he descended, ready to face whatever danger awaited. There, he found a young woman, no more than 25 years old, trembling against a wall, her purse scattered on the ground. A shadowy figure hovered over her, his intentions clear. Without a second thought, Izuku leaped down from the rooftop, his body a silent spectre in the night. The thief, caught off guard, turned to face the sudden disturbance, only to find himself staring into the eyes of an unseen menace. "Let her go," Izuku's voice echoed through the alleyway, a sound that seemed to come from every direction at once, thanks to his soundwave ability. The thief's eyes widened in surprise, his hand hovering over his stolen loot. The thief, a man with a quirk that allowed him to manipulate and harden parts of his body, had clearly underestimated the situation. With a snarl, he charged at the seemingly disembodied voice, his fists a blur as he attempted to land a blow. But Izuku was ready. Using his echo chameleon ability, he had already studied the man's movements, the echoes of his footsteps, and the faint creaks of his joints. He knew where the attack was coming from before it even began. As the thief swung wildly, Izuku used the thermal sense aspect of his quirk to track the heat of the man's body, his eyes locked onto the glowing target. With a flick of his wrist, he activated Soundwave, sending a pulse of vibrations through the ground beneath the thief's feet. The ground shuddered, and he stumbled, giving Izuku the opening he needed. With the grace of a cat, Izuku sprang into action, his body stretching and contorting as he used elasticity to dodge the thief's heavy fists. The man's quirk was formidable, but Izuku had faced and overcome worse in his past. He knew that fear and desperation could drive people to make mistakes, and he intended to exploit that. The thief, unable to land a hit, grew increasingly frustrated, his eyes darting around the alley, searching for the source of the disembodied commands. Izuku used his abilities to his advantage, his voice echoing from various points around them. "You're surrounded," he declared, his voice bouncing off the walls. The thief's pupils dilated with fear, sweat beading on his brow. The thief attempted to fight back, throwing punches in every direction. But Izuku was a MSTR of his new quirk, mimicking the man's movements and anticipating his every step. With each swing and miss, the thief's confidence wavered, and his breath grew ragged as he realized the invisible force was toying with him. Then, the moment came. Blinded by panic, the thief charged straight at Izuku. With a swift move, Izuku stepped aside, allowing the man to overextend himself. Using Echo Chameleon, he mimicked the sound of a siren, piercing the quiet night. The thief's head snapped towards the sound, and in that split second, Izuku struck. With precision, he tapped the thief's pressure points, and the man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The woman, whose eyes had grown wide with terror, slowly picked herself up. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am Deku," Izuku replied, his voice a comforting whisper as he helped her to her feet. He watched as she took in the sight of his costume, her eyes widening in a mix of awe and confusion. "Are you all right?" Her trembling hand reached out to touch his mask, and he gently pushed it aside. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Thank you." He nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had saved someone without the might of one for all. He had become a hero in his own right, a silent guardian of the night. "Remember, you're never truly alone in this city," he said before disappearing into the shadows, leaving her with a gentle pat on the shoulder. As he scaled the buildings, his new identity swirling in his thoughts, he felt a strange sense of belonging. The quiet whispers of the city's nightlife, the distant sirens, and the occasional cries for help were now his domain. The world was his stage, and he was the unsung hero. But even as he reveled in his victory, a shadow loomed in the back of his mind. What if someone figured out his secret? What if his new path led him back to the same fate that had claimed his past life? He pushed these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the warmth that spread through his chest. This was his chance to make a difference in a way that only he could. With each rooftop he crossed, with each shadow he claimed as his own, Izuku Midoriya became less of a symbol of peace and more of the whispers of the night. Deku, a vigilante whose name would be known only to the people he saved and the villains he brought to justice. As he made his way back home, the silence of the city was pierced by a sudden notification. It was the system, the very entity that had granted him this new lease on life. The message was simple yet resonated through his entire being. "Congratulations for the first person you saved, they have been logged into the system as saved person #." The notification served as a stark reminder of the immense responsibility that now rested upon his shoulders. He had been given a second chance, a rare gift that most could only dream of, and he had already taken his first steps down a path that would alter the course of his destiny. The number 001 gleamed on the screen, a digital badge of honor that acknowledged his first act of heroism. It was a powerful motivator, pushing him to continue on his mission to help those in need. As the night grew darker, the system's reward for his valor became more tangible. He felt a warmth spreading through his body, a gentle surge of power that washed away his fatigue. The notification read, "Your dedication to the safety of others has earned you a reward, redacted. Go to home base to receive the reward." He thought it was nice, but he would check it later, after another hour of patrol. He had waited almost 5 years to be back on the street saving people, and he needed to get it somewhat out of his system first. The next evening, as the city's heroes were busy dealing with a high-profile villain attack, Sir Night Eye sat in his office, poring over the day's reports. His sharp eyes scanned the documents, looking for anything that could hint at the next crisis. Among the mundane cases of petty theft and vandalism, one stood out, a peculiar incident in the alleyway. The woman's description of a mysterious vigilante who had come to her aid included a name that shocked the detective, Deku. Sir Night Eye rechecked the texts they had received, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. "Deku," he murmured, the name echoing through the silent room. It couldn't be coincidence. Someone had texted him with that name and then saved someone after admitting that they missed their shot at going to a hero academy. He was already looking into Yuga Aoyama, but this new development added urgency to his investigation. Sir Night-Eye, known for his meticulousness and attention to detail, knew that the Quirk registry was his best bet to uncover the truth behind this enigma. He pulled out his laptop, his fingers flying over the keys as he accessed the secure database. He typed in Mustafa and future site into the search bar, narrowing his eyes as he sifted through the results. The Quirk registry was a comprehensive list of every known Quirk user in Japan, a resource that heroes and authorities use to track potential threats and emerging abilities. But as he scrolled through the database, the only entries related to future sight in Mustafa were 18 people, all accounted for. The youngest was a child of 7, too young to be the vigilante he was searching for since Deku had mentioned missing their chance, and the oldest was an octogenarian, whose quirk was more of a burden than a boon at his age, leaving 16 suspects left. The rest ranged from teenagers of at least 16 to adults up to 55. Among them were a school teacher in their late 30s who used their future sight to prevent accidents, a young artist whose paintings uncannily depicted events days before they transpired, and a middle-aged businesswoman who had foreseen stock market fluctuations with eerie accuracy. Each individual had their own story and reasons for using their quirk in unique ways. Sir Night-Eye understood that he couldn't simply intrude into their lives and demand answers. Instead, he needed to be clever, observing from the shadows, much like the vigilante he was trying to find. His thoughts raced as he plotted his next move. He would visit these individuals, gauge their reactions to the name Deku, and see if any of them had the skills or determination to become a hero under the cover of darkness. It was a delicate balance that required patience and precision. The first person on his list was the businesswoman, Mrs. Tsuraba. At 54, she had built a small empire based on her uncanny predictions. As he arrived at her office, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the cityscape. Her receptionist greeted him with a smile that felt almost too perfect, causing Sir Night-Eye to feel a twinge of suspicion. Did she know why he was there? Mrs. Tsuraba was a stately woman with sharp features and piercing eyes. She exuded an air of control and greeted him with a courteous nod as he entered her office. "What brings the great Sir Night-Eye to my humble abode?" she asked, her tone light but her gaze intense. "Just a routine check," he replied, his voice calm and even. "We're looking into a series of incidents that might be related to someone with a quirk similar to yours." He paused, watching her reaction. "Someone who goes by the name of Deku." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for a brief moment, Sir Night-Eye could see the gears turning in her mind. "Deku," she repeated, stroking her chin thoughtfully. "A peculiar name. I don't know anyone by that name, but if I come across any information, I'll be sure to pass it along." Knowing he wouldn't get more from her without a warrant, he thanked her for her time and left, feeling an increasing sense of unease with each step. Next on his list was the artist, Mr. Seisho. At 29, he had gained notoriety for his eerily prophetic paintings. His studio was a cluttered mess of half-finished canvases and paint tubes, the smell of turpentine heavy in the air. He greeted Sir Night-Eye with a mix of curiosity and caution. The detective explained his visit, observing as Mr. Seisho's eyes darted around the room, searching for something. "I understand you have the ability to see the future," Sir Night-Eye said, his tone measured. "Perhaps you've had a vision that could help us." Mr. Seisho paused, his brush hovering over an unfinished painting. "My visions are abstract," he replied, his voice tentative. "They come in flashes, in colors and shapes that I interpret as best I can. But I've heard whispers of someone calling themselves Deku, a hero that no one has truly seen but whose deeds speak louder than any words." His eyes met Sir Night-Eye's, and for a moment, the detective sensed that Mr. Seisho knew more than he was revealing. The other 14 individuals with some type of future sight were an eclectic mix of ages and backgrounds, each living their lives shaped by their quirks. The youngest was a teenager named Rina, whose visions of the future were more like premonitions of impending danger. A group of 5 in their 20s each had a different take on their shared gift. Hiro was once an aspiring hero whose future sight was limited to glimpses of immediate danger, making him an unpredictable but effective combatant. Kazu had a more strategic mind, using his foresight to meticulously plan his days and avoid potential mishaps. Miyu, a journalist, had a broader view of the future, allowing her to write articles that often came true, earning her both respect and fear from her peers. The oldest of the group was a man named Hiroshi, a former hero who had retired early due to the burden of seeing too much, leaving him a recluse in his 40s. The remaining individuals were a diverse array of small-time heroes and civilians, each with their own story. There was the middle-aged office worker, Yuko, whose mundane visions made her the neighborhood's unofficial fortune-teller. Then there was the young couple, Ryu and Akira, whose combined future sight allowed them to anticipate each other's moves with uncanny precision. The eldest, a gentle old woman named Obasan, used her quirk to help her grandchildren find lost toys and avoid scraped knees. Besides Hiro, none of these people fit the profile with a quick look through their records. Sir Knight I would watch Hiro closely, but he had a gut feeling that Deku was someone else entirely. After all, the Vigilante's actions didn't scream, I want to be a hero. But rather, I need to help people. Something Hiro had done but was eager to leave behind. The evening had been a whirlwind of emotions for Izuku. After his first successful rescue, he rushed to his home base, as the system called it, which was just his apartment. The moment he stepped inside, he heard the familiar ding, reward unlocked for the hero known as Deku, zone enforcement. The system recognized his valor and granted him a new quirk. The notification described the power, and Izuku felt a sense of awe at the sheer potential of this gift. The new quirk, zone enforcement, was a defensive mechanism that allowed him to create a bubble-like sphere. The barrier could expand and contract easily, allowing anyone to pass through until it was fully extended. Once it solidified, it became an almost unbreakable shell. It wasn't just a simple force field, it had the unique property of warping space within it to enhance the effectiveness of one chosen quirk in the surrounding area. However, the drawback was significant. Using it at full capacity would drain him to the point of unconsciousness for an entire week. Before Izuku could delve deeper into the implications of this quirk, he received another familiar ding from the system, your quirks have once again merged. Izuku's eyes widened in astonishment as he read the description of his new merged quirk, spatial kappa control. This quirk granted him the ability to manipulate the space around him, allowing for impressive feats that would make any pro-hero envious. He could create zones of varying sizes that would protect and enhance the abilities of those within them. The potential uses for this power were vast. It could serve as a shelter for allies, a trap for enemies, or even amplify his own quirks. The thought of combining spatial kappa control with his classmates when you came back around filled him with excitement. Imagine the tactical advantage this quirk could provide in a fight, turning the tide with a simple declaration of intent. But for now, Izuku had to keep his newfound power a secret. The system informed him that it would take time for his body to fully adapt to the new quirk, and training would be essential. The next 3 hours were a blur of research and experimentation. Izuku studied the properties of spatial kappa control with the same fervor he had once approached his studies of One for All. He quickly discovered that the zones could be tailored to enhance specific types of quirks, and he practiced diligently to master this new aspect of his power. Each successful test brought him closer to understanding the intricacies of his abilities, and he felt a sense of excitement at the prospect of sharing these gifts with others. His mother's voice called him back to reality. He quickly stowed away his quirk-related research, knowing he had to go to school and maintain his cover as an ordinary elementary student. It was a strange balance, being a hero one night and a student the next day, but it was part of the life he had chosen. "Coming, Mom," he called out, pushing aside the excitement of the previous evening's events. The schoolyard buzzed with chatter and laughter, children playing games of tag and whispering about the latest hero sightings. As he sat in class, his mind wandered, planning how he could train and refine his newfound abilities without alerting his classmates or teachers. The bell rang, signaling the end of the first PRD, and as the students filed out into the hallway, Izuku felt the weight of his decision to become a hero once again. With each step toward his next class, the excitement grew, and he wondered if his classmates had noticed the subtle changes in his demeanor. In the second PRD, his focus on schoolwork was interrupted by a gentle tap on his shoulder. He looked up to find his homeroom teacher, Ms. Tsusu, holding out a slip of paper with a concerned smile. Midoriya-kun, the principal would like to see you in her office. It seems urgent. The classroom fell silent as all eyes turned to Izuku. His heart skipped a beat. Could this have something to do with his nocturnal heroics? Had he been discovered? He tried to keep his expression neutral as he took the note, nodding to Ms. Tsusu. Of course, he murmured, gathering his things and heading out of the room. The walk to the principal's office felt like an eternity, his thoughts racing. The hallways of the school were eerily quiet, the echoes of his footsteps the only sound accompanying his worries. What could she possibly want? Was it about the Vigilante, Deku? He took a deep breath to steady his nerves before knocking on the door. Enter, Principal Nueza's voice called from within. Izuku stepped inside, finding the room filled with a tension that thickened the air. Principal Nueza sat behind her desk, her mechanical limbs folded neatly in front of her, and to his surprise, his mom was there, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. The room was charged with tension, all directed at him. Principal Nueza cleared her throat, her expression unreadable. Midoriya, your mother and I have talked, and we believe you aren't being challenged in your classes. What? Izuku's voice squeaked, his heart racing. This wasn't what he had expected at all. We've received some information about a scholarship opportunity that we think might be the perfect fit for you, Principal Nueza continued, sliding a brochure across the desk. It was for the prestigious private school Somei Elementary. Izuku recognized the name from Tenya Ida's middle school. This must have been where he went for elementary. They're holding a special exam for academically gifted students. We believe your unique perspective and experiences would be an asset to their community, and they have agreed to consider your application. Izuku stared at the brochure, his thoughts racing. A scholarship to an elite school that was likely to house one of his greatest friends from his last life. Yet, he would be leaving Katsuki behind, but the decision was made for him. His mother had already filled out the application and had it ready to submit. I know you can handle it, she said with a determined smile, her eyes brimming with pride. This is your chance to grow, to become even more than you already are. With a heavy heart, Izuku agreed. He knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. As he walked out of the office, the weight of his new identity as Deku and his future at Somei Elementary settled on his shoulders. It was a chance to start anew, to build a legacy away from the shadow of his past. The rest of the day passed in a blur, his thoughts consumed by the implications of his impending transfer. At the end of school, Izuku found himself standing at the crossroads of his decision, torn between his old life and the path that lay before him. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "This is your chance to grow." As he watched his classmates leave the school grounds, the reality of their parting grew heavier, and he knew he had to talk to Katsuki. Katsuki, the fiery prodigy who had been his rival and friend, the one who had pushed him to become the hero he was today. Izuku knew that his departure would leave a gap in their friendship, but he also understood that Katsuki might not fully grasp the importance of this opportunity. With a deep breath, he approached his childhood friend. Kaken, I need to tell you something, Izuku began, his voice wavering. Katsuki looked up from his intense thinking, his eyes shifting to Izuku with his signature cocky smirk. What is it, Izuku? Izuku's hands trembled slightly as he handed the scholarship brochure to Katsuki. I've been offered a chance to go to Somei Elementary. I'm going to take the transfer exam. The smirk on Katsuki's face faltered, confusion and a hint of sadness flickering in his eyes. But why, he asked, his voice softer than usual. They think I can be an asset to their school, Izuku explained, trying to keep his voice steady. And it's an opportunity for me to grow and learn in ways that I can't hear. Katsuki stared at the brochure, his gaze intense. But what about us, he finally said, the question hanging in the air. What about our promise? Izuku swallowed hard, feeling the lump in his throat. Our promise will always stand, Kaken, he assured him. I'll still be your rival. I'll still aim to be the #1 hero. But I need to do this. For me, and for everyone we want to save. Katsuki's grip tightened on the brochure, crumpling it slightly. Fine, he said, his voice tight with emotion. But if you think you can just leave and come back and walk all over me with your fancy education, you're wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Izuku knew that his decision to transfer would change things between them, but he didn't anticipate the depth of Katsuki's reaction. His friend had always been competitive, but this was different. It felt as if the very foundation of their rivalry had shifted, and with it, the dynamic of their friendship. Hey, we'll still meet at UA, right? Izuku asked. Yeah, Katsuki replied, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. We'll see who's stronger then. Izuku nodded, understanding the unspoken challenge. Their rivalry had always been the engine that drove them forward. I'll be counting on it, he said, trying to lighten the mood. As the days grew closer to the transfer exam, Izuku's resolve grew stronger. He knew that this was a chance to not only better himself but to also protect those who couldn't protect themselves. His mother's encouragement had been a beacon of light in his decision, reminding him of the hero he was destined to become. The exam itself was a test of intellect, endurance, and courage. Izuku faced each challenge with the same unyielding spirit that had carried him through his previous life. The first challenge was a written test, a gauntlet of questions that spanned every subject imaginable. He breezed through the material, his pencil moving swiftly. His mind raced, recalling his years of study and experience, allowing him to answer questions that would have stumped even the brightest students his age. The second challenge was a physical one, a series of obstacles that tested his strength, speed, and agility. Surprisingly, the examiners had anticipated his potential and had included a section that tested his strategic thinking and problem-solving skills. It was clear that Somei Elementary was not just looking for students with strong minds, but those with a creative mind as well. As he tackled the mental challenges, Izuku felt a sense of déjà vu, as if he were back in the UA entrance exam, facing an obstacle course that had once seemed insurmountable. But this time, he was more than prepared. He had lived through the trials of being a hero, and his mind was sharper than ever. Each hurdle he faced was met with a cool analysis and swift execution, his body moving almost on instinct. He turned in the test in record time, shocking the examiner. Are you sure you read every question carefully? The examiner asked. Yes sir, I did, Izuku replied confidently. The final challenge was an interview with the school's principal, who had a stern look as he studied Izuku. The man was intimidating, but Izuku remained unfazed, knowing that his heart was in the right place. He was asked questions about his aspirations, his views on himself, and his reasons for wanting to transfer to Somei Elementary. Izuku's answers were sincere and thoughtful, reflecting the wisdom he had gained from his past experiences. He spoke of his longing to support others, to empower those who might otherwise feel powerless, and to make a difference without seeking the spotlight. The principal's gaze grew contemplative, and Izuku could feel the weight of his scrutiny. As the interview came to a close, the principal leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Your application is unconventional, Midoriya, he said, his expression unreadable. But your determination and unique perspective are exactly what we look for in a Somei student. He slid a thick envelope across the desk. You've passed the exam. Your scholarship has been approved. Izuku stared at the envelope, his heart racing. He had done it. He was going to Somei Elementary. His mother's proud smile was etched in his mind as he accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you, Principal, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. The following week was a whirlwind of preparations. He had to leave his old life behind, saying goodbye to his classmates and friends. Some were surprised, others envious, but all wished him luck. His heart felt a pang of regret as he watched them from afar, knowing that he would not be there to share in their growth. But he also knew that by accepting the scholarship, he was taking a step toward creating a better future for all of them. The day of the transfer came, and Izuku found himself standing outside the gates of Somei Elementary, the sun casting long shadows across the school grounds. His stomach was a knot of nerves and excitement, but he took a deep breath and stepped through the gates. He was greeted by the sight of students in their sharp uniforms, moving with a purpose that mirrored the precision of their school's reputation. As he walked through the halls, Izuku couldn't help but feel like an imposter. These students were the cream of the CRP, bred for greatness, and here he was, an average person with an unfair advantage even by Quirk standards. But he pushed those thoughts aside, they wouldn't help him here. His first class was advanced math, and as he took his seat, the room grew quieter. His classmates, a mix of eager young faces and a few snobbish rich ones, glanced his way with curiosity. The moment that changed everything was when he met a young boy with a peculiar and familiar quirk, one that allowed him to use his legs to accelerate from the engines in them. "Hello, my name is Tenya Ida," he introduced himself, already bowing respectfully. "Hello Tenya Ida, my name is Izuku Midoriya," Izuku replied with a smile, extending his hand. Tenya's eyes widened with surprise as he took Izuku's hand, his grip firm and earnest. "It's an honor to meet you," he said, his voice filled with respect. Izuku's smile grew as he felt the warmth of his new classmate's handshake. He knew that this was the start of something special, a bond that would be tested and strengthened in the trials to come. As the class began and the teacher droned on about math, Izuku couldn't help but feel a twinge of nostalgia. The first day at Somei Elementary passed quickly, with Izuku settling into a routine of rigorous academic challenges and getting to know his new classmates. Despite the initial whispers and stares, he soon found that his peers were genuinely curious about the boy who had seemingly come out of nowhere to claim a scholarship spot at their elite school. They were a diverse bunch, each with their own unique quirks and aspirations, and Izuku felt a kinship with them that went beyond their shared love of heroism. In the evening, after a long day of learning and making new connections, Izuku would sit in his room and reflect on his decision. The quiet solitude allowed him to think deeply about his next moves as a vigilante. The potential for trouble was too great. Instead, he would have to tread carefully, using the new aspect of his quirk to make a difference in the lives of others. After the sun had set and the city had donned its cloak of shadows, Izuku donned his own, the green and black suit of Deku. The wooden mask was a reminder of the promise he had made to All Might, to carry on the legacy of One for All, but now it was also a symbol of his newfound purpose. He slipped into the night, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anticipation. The streets were quieter, the bustle of the city giving way to the whispers of the night. His echo-chameleon, quirk aspect allowed him to blend into the darkness, his footsteps silent as he moved through the alleyways. He could feel the eyes of the city on him, not with fear or admiration, but with a quiet respect. As Deku, he had the power to change lives in ways that his former self could only dream of. His mission was clear, to be the unseen hero that Japan never knew it needed, the one who operated in the shadows to ensure the safety of the innocent. He would not be a beacon of hope like All Might, but a silent guardian, a watchful protector. On his first night out, Deku encountered a group of thugs attempting to mug a defenseless old man. Izuku's heart raced as he saw the fear in the old man's eyes. It was a scene all too familiar to him, a reminder of the countless times he had been unable to save someone in his past life due to his lack of a quirk. But this time was different. He had the power to act, to make a real difference. With a deep breath, he engaged his quirk. His body blended into the shadows of the alleyway, his form becoming indistinguishable from the darkness around him. The thugs, too preoccupied with their victim, didn't notice the silent figure that had joined them. Using Echo Chameleon, Deku mimicked the sound of a cat in distress from a nearby rooftop. The thug's head snapped up, searching for the source of the sound. It was the perfect distraction. He took advantage of their confusion to sneak up behind the leader, using his sticky fingers to disarm him without alerting the others. The thug's knife clattered to the ground, and Izuku stepped forward, his eyes glowing with determination. The thugs froze, their eyes wide with terror as the shadowy figure of Deku emerged before them. The old man gasped, recognizing the hero that had saved him countless times in the past through the tales of his grandchildren. Thank you," he stammered, trembling with relief. Izuku nodded, his voice a soft echo in the night. "Don't worry, I'll handle this," he assured, his voice a mix of the echoing whispers he had copied from the city's soundscape. The thug's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the voice. They hadn't expected opposition, especially not from a kid in a costume. With a sudden burst of speed, Deku lunged at the thugs. His echo ability allowed him to mimic the sounds of their panic, throwing them off balance as they tried to pinpoint his location. His thermal sense helped him track their heat signatures, giving him an advantage in the dark. He moved swiftly, using minor healing to patch up small injuries sustained during his quick takedowns. The fight was swift and silent, a dance of shadows and whispers. When it was over, the thugs were tied up neatly with the rope he had brought. The old man stared at him in awe, from one old-timer to another. "Stay safe." The old man nodded, "Thank you, I will," before vanishing back into the night. He had done it, his second successful rescue as a vigilante. The rush of adrenaline was a potent mix with his newfound power and the anonymity it brought. The whispers of his presence grew louder each night as Deku continued his vigilant patrols. His new quirk allowed him to move unseen, to be the hero that no one knew was there. He took solace in the quiet moments of victory, knowing that the fear he inspired in the hearts of the wicked was a small price to pay for the peace he brought to the innocent. Back at their old school, the absence of Izuku was palpable, especially to his closest friend, Katsuki Bakugo. He had been a constant presence in Katsuki's life, pushing him to be better, to strive for more. Now, with the news of Izuku's transfer to Somei Elementary, a school for the elite and the gifted, Katsuki felt a strange emptiness that not even his explosive quirk could fill. He moped around the classroom, his usual fiery spirit dampened by the weight of denial. It couldn't be true, Izuku couldn't have left them behind with all these worthless extras. But the evidence was undeniable, the empty desk, the whispers of their classmates, and the lingering scent of his favorite katsudon in the air. It was a stark reminder that their days of rivalry and friendship were, for now, on pause. Katsuki felt a heavy silence settle over him, and an observant classmate called out, breaking the tension. "What's with you, Bakugo?" Katsuki scoffed, clenching his fists at his side. He muttered, "Nothing," his eyes glaring at the ground where Izuku's desk once stood. The emptiness felt like a wound that refused to heal. He couldn't believe that Izuku would leave them all behind to chase a dream at a prestigious school. But deep down, he knew the truth. Izuku had always been different, always striving for more, just like him. Now he had gone to a place that could offer him that opportunity. Katsuki slammed his fists on the desk, the sound echoing through the classroom. "It's not fair," he said quietly, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and frustration. The teacher, sensing the tension, approached him cautiously. "Bakugo," she began softly, "I know you and Midoriya were close. But sometimes, people have to follow their own paths. Perhaps this is his way of becoming even greater than he already is." Katsuki scoffed again, his eyes never leaving the empty desk. "Greater than me," he spat. "There's no way he'll ever surpass me, we were supposed to be equals. No quirk can change that." Yet, doubt began to creep in. Izuku had always found a way to push past his limits and achieve the impossible. Could this new path propel him to the heights of heroism that Katsuki craved? Throughout the rest of the day, Katsuki couldn't focus on his classes, his thoughts consumed by Izuku. He had always been a constant presence, a reminder of what Katsuki strived for. Now, with Izuku gone, he felt adrift in uncertainty. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Katsuki stormed out of the classroom, his thoughts racing. As he walked through the emptying halls, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Izuku had been more than just a rival, he was a driving force, pushing Katsuki to be the best. Without that competition, what was left? The weight of the day's events bore down on Katsuki as he exited the school, the sun setting behind him. His heart raced with a mix of anger and determination. He couldn't let Izuku surpass him, not now, not ever. With fiery resolve, Katsuki vowed to train even harder. He would show everyone that he was not only the best at you, but the best in the entire world. His fists clenched tightly as he made his way to his secret training spot, a place where he had pushed himself to his limits countless times. The quiet, hidden part of the park he and Izuku always visited now felt eerie and empty without his friend's presence. Katsuki threw himself into his training with a ferocity that matched his explosive quirk. He knew that to honor their friendship and rivalry, he had to become the hero who could stand alongside Izuku. The thought of Izuku achieving greatness without him fueled his longing to improve. He began with his basics, pushing his quirk to its limits. Each explosion echoed through the park, shaking the trees and lighting up the sky with a fiery display of his power. His eyes burned with determination as he imagined Izuku's face, striving to surpass him in strength. He had to be ready to face whatever Izuku had become, ready to show him that he would still become the #1 hero. As he trained, a new resolve grew within Katsuki. He knew that Izuku was out there, training just as hard, if not harder, than he was. The thought of his friend excelling without him was a painful reminder of what he had to achieve. It was time to push himself to the brink, to surpass even the greatness he knew Izuku was capable of achieving. His fists grew hotter, and his explosions more powerful as time passed. Mitsuki and Masaru watched their son from a distance, their expressions filled with a mix of pride and concern. They had always known Katsuki's fiery spirit, but this was something new. They could feel the change in him, the raw determination consuming him. Meanwhile, Sir Night-Eye, the sharp-eyed hero known for his precognitive quirk, kept a close watch on the events unfolding in the city. His interest in the mysterious Vigilante grew with each passing night, especially after the incident involving the thugs and an old man. His instincts told him that there was more to Deku than met the eye. Sitting in his office, surrounded by screens from his network of informants and surveillance drones, Sir Night-Eye focused on footage from an alleyway. The figure of Deku was a blur of shadows and whispers. He rewound the video, searching for any clue that could lead him to the identity of the new hero. His eyes narrowed as he studied Deku's movements, the precision of his actions, and the uncanny ability to blend in. It was as if he was born to be unnoticed until it was too late for his adversaries. Sir Night-Eye's mind raced with questions. Who was this new hero? And why did they feel so familiar? It was as if he had seen this style of fighting, this brand of heroism, somewhere before. His instincts, honed by years of experience, told him that this was not a random event, nor was Deku just any ordinary vigilante. With a furrowed brow, he called up the records of recent transfers and disappearances, aware that Deku's normal patrol seemed to change, focusing on those with a history of heroism. His eyes scanned through the profiles, searching for a name that would stand out, a face that matched the shadowy figure he had seen in the footage. As he delved deeper into the archives, he compiled a list of individuals who had recently relocated, suspecting that Delu had lied about having a precognition quirk. The list grew to 9 names, each with a unique story and reason for seeking a new life. The first name was Hiroyuki Shimura, a young man whose quirk of mole manipulation had been deemed too dangerous for public use after an incident during a school science fair. Next was Rina Shimada, whose gravity reduction quirk had made her the target of bullying, forcing her to drop out of school. Then there was Kenjiro Yoshida, whose mood swing quirk had led to a tumultuous past, leaving him yearning for solitude. Each name told a story of struggle and perseverance, and as Sir Night-Eye read through the list, he couldn't shake the feeling that one of these individuals might be the hero he had been searching for. However, the 5th name caught his attention, Inko Midoriya. She had lived in the area of Deku's past sightings, and the timing made sense. Inko had a son whom she would put to bed before going out. This had to be the answer. His heart raced at the possibility of solving a case that had been a persistent challenge. He quickly gathered all the information he could find on her, eager to validate his hunch. The information on Inko Midoriya was limited but painted a picture of a woman who had recently dedicated her life to her son. Sir Night-Eye's curiosity deepened as he searched for any connections to the vigilante known as Deku. It was when he stumbled upon a forgotten application to Shiketsu High School that his suspicion turned into certainty. Inko had indeed tried to enroll, but her application was rejected due to the lack of a suitable quirk. The date of the application coincided with the first message he received from Deku, the mysterious vigilante whose quirk had been growing stronger each night. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and the realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. With a newfound sense of purpose and adrenaline, Sir Night-Eye prepared to confront the truth. He knew that if his suspicions were correct, he would be dealing with a vigilante capable of shaking the very foundations of their society. He donned his hero costume, which was similar to his usual office attire, and set out. On his way to the Midoriya residence, he encountered a small-time villain causing a disturbance in a nearby alley. The villain, known as Cold Wave, had the quirk of creating icy projectiles from his fingertips. His usual method was to create chaos and then vanish into the night, leaving the authorities to deal with the aftermath. Sir Night-Eye sighed, momentarily distracted by the annoyance of having to deal with this petty criminal. However, he knew that even the smallest threats had to be neutralized for the sake of the city's peace. He approached with caution, scanning the area for any signs of innocent bystanders. "Cold Wave," he called out, his voice echoing off the narrow alley walls. The villain turned, a smug grin on his face as he recognized the hero. "Looks like you're the one who's going to cool off tonight," he taunted. Cold Wave launched a volley of ice shards at Sir Night-Eye, but the seasoned hero was too quick, his quirk allowing him to anticipate the trajectory of the attack. He sidestepped easily, the ice shattering against the pavement where he once stood. The villain's smug expression faltered as he realized he might have underestimated the hero who walked the line between shadows and spotlight. "You're not going anywhere tonight," Sir Night-Eye declared, his eyes burning with conviction. He knew that while this was a distraction from his true quest, he couldn't allow any harm to come to the citizens of his city. "Your reign of terror ends here." The alley became a frozen battleground, with the two adversaries facing each other down. Cold Wave's eyes narrowed as he prepared his next attack, his teeth chattering from the effort of maintaining his quirk's output. The chilling aura around him grew denser, signaling the imminent assault. Sir Night-Eye's gaze remained unfaltering, his mind racing through possible scenarios and counter-moves. He had to end this quickly. Every moment spent here was a moment away from uncovering the truth about Deku. The villain's grin widened, his confidence bolstered by his quirk's power. He raised his hand, the air around it crackling with cold. "You think you're so smart, Night-Eye," he jeered, a gust of icy wind accompanying his words. "I'll show you what a real hero is made of." Sir Night-Eye's eyes narrowed in response, his own quirk flaring to life. The air around his fists shimmered as he charged forward, closing the distance between them. As Cold Wave released a barrage of icicles, the hero's fists shot out like bullets, each punch guided by the whispers of his foresight. The first few icicles shattered against his knuckles, but he didn't slow, his movements a dance of precision and power. With each blow, Cold Wave's confidence crumbled, replaced by a look of horror as he realized he had bitten off more than he could chew. His quirk, once a tool of fear, became a liability as the hero's punches shattered his icy defenses with ease. Sir Night-Eye's years of experience allowed him to dodge and counter every attack, turning what was meant to be a standoff into a one-sided demolition. But amidst the chaos, Sir Night-Eye's thoughts remained focused on his true goal, finding out the truth about Deku. The vigilante's uncanny ability to fight and vanish into thin air was too dangerous to be ignored. With swiftness, Sir Night-Eye ducked beneath Cold Wave's outstretched arm and delivered a powerful uppercut, sending the villain reeling. The fight was intense, but it was clear that the hero's experience and strategic thinking were too much for the overconfident villain. As the fight concluded and Cold Wave was apprehended, Sir Night-Eye couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still ahead. He had to know if Deku was truly the hero he appeared to be or if something more sinister lurked beneath the surface. He resumed his journey, his mind racing with scenarios. What if Deku was someone with a vendetta? Someone who had suffered a great loss at the hands of villains and had decided to take the law into their own hands. Or perhaps it was a desperate cry for help, a plea for someone to recognize the potential they had been denied. The journey to the Midoriya household was fraught with tension, each step echoing in the quiet streets as if to announce his arrival. Sir Nightye's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to piece together the puzzle of Deku's true identity. He knew that the path he was on could lead to either a new ally or a powerful foe, and the weight of his decision rested heavily on his shoulders. As he approached the house, he took a moment to compose himself after the long walk. The lights were on, and a gentle warmth emanated from within, hinting at the seemingly quiet lives of those who resided there. The door was unassuming, but the anticipation behind it was palpable. He took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the doorbell. This was it. He was about to come face to face with the woman who might hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Deku. The door swung open, revealing Inko Midoriya, a kind-hearted woman with a gentle smile that had once been etched with worry for her quirkless son. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice filled with caution. Sir Nighteye stepped into the light, his gaze intense. "Mrs. Midoriya," he began, his voice firm yet measured. "I am Sir Nighteye, you might know me as All Might's sidekick, and I have reason to believe that you have become involved in some unusual activities." The color drained from Inko's face as she stared at the hero before her. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her heart racing. But she couldn't fool Sir Nighteye, his sharp eyes saw right through her. Sir Nighteye studied her for a moment, his gaze unyielding. Then, with a sigh, he said, "I know you're Deku, Mrs. Midoriya. I've seen the application for Shiketsu High School, and the texts you sent to me line up perfectly." Inko's confusion grew as she stared at the hero before her. Deku. How could she possibly be that new vigilante Deku that she hears from the news at least once a week now? Inko was anything but a fighter, she herself knew that. Her thoughts were a jumble as she tried to piece together what was happening. I am not Deku," she managed to say, her voice quivering. Sir Nighteye's gaze bore into her, his expression unyielding. "Don't lie to me," he said calmly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Your motivation, timing, movement, it all lines up to Deku." Inko's mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was saying. Her. Deku. It was ludicrous. She had never had any aspirations of becoming a hero since she was 16, they had long since died when she met Hisashi. How long had it been since that terrible day? I don't understand," she stammered, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "How could I be Deku? I'm just a mother trying to make ends meet and keep my son safe." Sir Nighteye's gaze softened slightly, recognizing the genuine bewilderment in her voice. "If you have nothing to hide, then you won't mind if I check your house." Then. Inko's eyes widened even further, her heart hammering in her chest. "What? Why would you need to do that?" she sputtered. "To confirm your identity," he replied, his voice still firm but with a hint of understanding. "If you truly are not involved in these activities, then there should be no issue." Her thoughts spun out of control as she considered his proposal. If she let him in, would he find something that could link her to Deku? Would she be able to maintain the charade? Her mind was a maelstrom of doubt and fear, but she had no choice. With trembling hands, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter her home. The house was modest, filled with the warmth of a loving family. Photos of Izuku adorned the walls, chronicling his life from a smiling toddler to a young child in a semi-private elementary school uniform. As Sir Nighteye walked through the rooms, his eyes searched for any sign of the quirks he had seen Deku use. Yet, everything was eerily ordinary, and the more he looked, the more Inko felt a sense of unease grow within her. I don't know why you think I'm this Deku," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunder of her own heart. "I've never done anything like that." Sir Nighteye nodded solemnly, his eyes sweeping the living room. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Midoriya. But I must be thorough. He began to check the room, moving to the coat closet and then the bookshelves, looking for any signs of a vigilante's gear. As he moved from room to room, Inko trailed behind him, her eyes darting nervously, not out of guilt but simply the fact that she was being accused. "You don't have to do this," she protested weakly, her voice shaking with the stress of the situation. "I promise you, I'm not Deku." Sir Night-Eye continued his search, his eyes sharp and focused. He checked under beds, in closets, and even peered into the fridge. He was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. Yet, with each passing moment, he felt the doubt creeping in. The house was clean, almost too clean for a single mother and her son. And then, he saw a little child with white hair, fully red eyes, and horns sticking out of his forehead. The child looked like he was just out of a deep slumber. "Mom, what's wrong?" he said, still rubbing his eyes and yawning. Sir Night-Eye froze, his hand hovering over a photo album, his mind racing. That's when it dawned on him, the child before him was Izuku Midoriya. But something was off his eyes, his horns. It couldn't be, could it? He quickly composed himself and turned to Inko. "Is this your son?" Inko nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes, that's Izuku," she said, her voice trembling. The hero looked from the confused child back to Inko. But your Quirk," he stuttered, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle before him. Inko looked at her son, then back at Sir Night-Eye with a mix of fear and determination. "Izuku, this is Sir Night-Eye. He's here to talk to us about something important." Izuku rubbed his eyes and looked up at the hero with curiosity. "What about?"